Oh, a new visitor from the woods. Welcome. Are you a lost wanderer, tired from a long journey? Then join me, sit beside the fireplace, and let me tell you some stories that may soothe your mood as you regain your strength. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also comment where you're watching from and what time it is. You all set? Good. Let's start the story with two of the wizarding world's unsung heroes, whose courage and sacrifice often fade into the background of the greater narrative of the First Wizarding War. Tonight we delve into the poignant tale of Frank and Alice Longbottom. Let's start the story with two of the wizarding world's unsung heroes, whose courage and sacrifice often fade into the background of the greater narrative of the First Wizarding War. Tonight, we delve into the poignant tale of Frank and Alice Longbottom. In the warm glow of our fireplace, imagine a time when the wizarding world was emerging from shadow, the early 1970s, when Frank and Alice were young students at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Frank, a tall young man with a kind face and steady hands, was known for his unwavering loyalty and precision with defensive spells. Alice, with her round, friendly face and quick wit, possessed an extraordinary talent for charms and a laugh that could brighten the darkest corridors of the castle. They were not in the same year at school, but their paths crossed frequently in the Gryffindor common room, where courage and determination were valued above all else. Perhaps it was there, beside another crackling fire much like ours, that their story truly began. Two brilliant minds united by shared values and growing affection. After graduation, as Lord Voldemort's shadow lengthened across Britain, Frank and Alice made a choice that would define their lives. They joined the Auror office at the Ministry of Magic, dedicating themselves to the protection of both magical and non-magical communities from dark forces. The training to become an Auror was notoriously difficult. 3 years of intense study, practical examinations, and character assessments, yet both excelled, showing particular aptitude for concealment, stealth, and tracking. Their marriage came during these troubled times, a quiet ceremony attended by close friends and family. Among the guests were those who would later join them in the Order of the Phoenix, Albus Dumbledore's secret organization formed to combat Lord Voldemort's growing power. The Longbottoms became valued members, their Auror training making them especially effective in the clandestine war against the Death Eaters. Picture them now, moving through the misty streets of London at dawn, wands concealed but ready, their eyes watchful as they gather intelligence on suspected Death Eater activity. Frank's methodical mind complemented Alice's intuitive approach to investigation. Together, they became one of the most effective teams in the Auror department, responsible for the capture and imprisonment of many who served the Dark Lord. It is worth noting that the Longbottoms faced Lord Voldemort personally 3 times and survived, a rare distinction they shared with only James and Lily Potter. These encounters spoke not only to their skill but to their extraordinary courage, standing firm when many would have fled. Perhaps this is why they were eventually targeted, not only as enemies of the Death Eaters, but as potential subjects of a prophecy that foretold the Dark Lord's downfall. For their son Neville was born as July ended in 1980, fitting the criteria of the prophecy that would ultimately mark Harry Potter. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. How different might the wizarding world's history have been had Voldemort chosen the Longbottom child instead of the Potter boy? It is one of many questions that swirl like smoke from our fire, impossible to answer yet compelling to consider. When Voldemort fell following his attack on the Potters, many believed the danger had passed. But for the Longbottoms, the worst was yet to come. In the turbulent aftermath, as jubilation mixed with confusion throughout the wizarding community, a group of Death Eaters remained determined to locate their fallen master. Led by Bellatrix Lestrange, whose devotion to Voldemort bordered on fanatical, this group included her husband Rodolphus, his brother Rabastan, and Barty Crouch Jr., son of a high-ranking ministry official. They believed the Longbottoms, given their position as Aurors, would have information about Voldemort's whereabouts after his apparent destruction. The attack came without warning at the Longbottoms' home. Though skilled duelists, Frank and Alice were outnumbered and eventually overwhelmed. What followed stands as one of the most horrific episodes of the post-war period. The Death Eaters, desperate for information the Longbottoms did not possess, subjected them to the Cruciatus curse, a torture so intense that it causes unimaginable pain without physical damage. Bellatrix Lestrange, whose skill with this unforgivable curse was notorious, led the torture. Hour after hour, the curse was applied, again and again. "Tell us where he is," they demanded. But there was nothing to tell, no secret knowledge that could end their suffering. Most would have broken, invented lies, said anything to stop the pain. Not Frank and Alice Longbottom. Even as their minds began to fracture under the relentless assault, they revealed nothing, protected their integrity until they could no longer recognize themselves or each other. Their last conscious act was one of defiance, silence in the face of overwhelming cruelty. When they were finally discovered, the damage had been done. The Cruciatus curse, applied with such intensity for so long, had shattered their minds beyond repair. They were alive, but the people they had been, the devoted aurors, loving parents and steadfast friends were gone, leaving only empty vessels behind. The perpetrators were captured and received life sentences in Azkaban, with Bellatrix Lestrange reportedly proud of her actions, boasting at her trial of her loyalty to the Dark Lord, but justice offered little consolation for what had been lost. Frank and Alice were transferred to the long-term care ward at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, where they would remain. Their son Neville, barely more than a year old, was taken in by his grandmother, Augusta Longbottom, Frank's mother, a formidable witch in her own right. Augusta raised her grandson with stories of his parents' bravery, though the weight of their legacy would prove challenging for young Neville to bear. The years passed, and the Longbottoms remained at St. Mungo's, occupying adjacent beds in the Janus Thicky ward for permanent spell damage. Their condition never improved. They recognized no one, not even their son when he visited, which he did faithfully, especially during holidays from Hogwarts. Alice developed a habit of giving Neville wrappers from the Drubal's best blowing gum that visitors would bring her. These seemingly meaningless gestures were treasured by Neville, who kept every wrapper, though he never explained the significance to his friends. Some part of him hoped they represented a connection, however fragile, to the mother who could no longer express her love in any normal way. The heartbreak of these visits was something Neville endured privately. To see one's parents alive yet irretrievably lost, to be recognized not as a son but as just another visitor, it was a unique form of grief, a continuous loss without closure. Yet Neville never abandoned them, carrying their photograph, defending their honor, and eventually growing into a young man who would make them proud, had they been able to understand. During the Second Wizarding War, when Neville stood up to Lord Voldemort himself at the Battle of Hogwarts, many saw Frank and Alice's courage manifested in their son, the steadfast refusal to yield to darkness, even when standing alone. This was their legacy, living on in the child they had so briefly known. The Longbottoms never recovered. They remain at St. Mungo's to this day, unaware of their son's achievements or of Voldemort's final defeat. In the aftermath of the Second Wizarding War, their story became more widely known, their sacrifice acknowledged alongside others who had fallen in the fight against dark magic. Neville eventually became a professor of herbology at Hogwarts, and it is said that he still visits his parents regularly, still accepts the sweet wrappers from his mother with the same grace and sadness he showed as a boy. He works now with students who know peace because of sacrifices like those made by Frank and Alice Longbottom, sacrifices that should never be forgotten. As our fire dims and the hour grows late, we are left to ponder the nature of heroism. The Longbottoms did not choose their fate, but they chose the path that led to it, standing against darkness when remaining neutral would have been safer. They represent a particular kind of courage, not the flashy heroics that make for exciting tales, but the quiet, unyielding integrity that forms the foundation of a just society. Their story reminds us that victory over darkness comes at a terrible price, paid not only by those like the Potters, who lost their lives, but also by those like the Longbottoms, who lost themselves. Both types of sacrifice deserve our remembrance and respect. As you drift toward sleep, consider this. How do we honor those who can never know they are honored? What debt do we owe to those who surrendered their futures so that others might have one? Perhaps the answer lies not in grand monuments, but in how we live our own lives, with the same courage and integrity that defined Frank and Alice Longbottom until the very end. Chapter 2. The Invasion of Legilimency. The ancient art of mind-reading shimmers in the darkness like a silver thread connecting one consciousness to another. As the embers of our fire glow softly in the gathering twilight, let us explore one of the most mysterious and unsettling branches of magic, Legilimency, the magical invasion of the mind. Legilimency stands among the most subtle and complex forms of magic practiced in the wizarding world. Far beyond simple mind-reading, it represents a sophisticated magical discipline that allows a skilled practitioner, a legilimens, to navigate the layers of another person's thoughts, extracting feelings, memories, and hidden truths that lie beneath the surface of consciousness. The etymology of the term itself reveals much about its nature. Legili derives from the Latin legere, meaning to read, while mens signifies mind. Together, they create the concept of mind reading, though this simplification barely scratches the surface of what true legilimency entails. Unlike many magical disciplines taught openly at institutions like Hogwarts, the art of legilimency has historically existed in the shadows of magical education. Its instruction has typically been reserved for private tutoring between master and apprentice, with formal study materials remaining scarce. This scarcity stems not from a lack of interest, but rather from the profound ethical questions that surround any magic capable of violating the sanctity of another's mind. The earliest documented accounts of legilimency date back to ancient Greece, where oracles were said to possess the ability to see beyond the veil of spoken words. Egyptian wizards developed techniques to extract memories from the minds of the living, believing this practice helped guide souls in the afterlife. These early practitioners understood little of the magical mechanics involved, often attributing their abilities to divine favor rather than magical skill. By medieval times, more structured approaches to legilimency emerged. The 12th century witch Morgana de Valois wrote what many consider the first scholarly examination of mind arts in her controversial text, Mentis Imperio. The opening of the mind. Her work established the fundamental principle that still guides legilimency today. The mind is not a book to be opened and read, but rather a complex, multi-layered landscape to be navigated with caution and precision. Picture the process, if you will. A legilimens does not simply hear the thoughts passing through their subject's mind. Instead, they perceive a swirling collection of images, emotions, and sensations, fragments of memory and consciousness that must be interpreted. A master legilimens learns to focus on specific elements within this chaotic mental landscape, extracting relevant information while avoiding becoming lost in the overwhelming flow of another's consciousness. The physical act of legilimency typically requires eye contact, the famous windows to the soul, serving as literal gateways to the mind. The incantation legilimens, pronounced with proper intent, while maintaining this visual connection, initiates the spell. However, the most accomplished practitioners can perform this magic non-verbally and in exceptionally rare cases without direct eye contact. Such skill represents the pinnacle of the art and is achieved by few in each generation. For the person subjected to legilimency, the experience varies dramatically depending on both the skill of the legilimens and whether they attempt to resist the intrusion. When performed by a skilled practitioner against an unresisting mind, legilimency can feel like nothing more than a curious sensation, perhaps a slight pressure behind the eyes, or the odd feeling of memories rising unbidden to the surface of thought. However, when forcefully applied or resisted, the experience becomes significantly more unpleasant. Victims describe sharp pains, disorientation, and the disturbing sensation of memories being forcibly extracted from their minds. The invasive nature of such encounters leaves little doubt as to why this magic walks the precarious line between acceptable magical practice and dark arts. Throughout wizarding history, several individuals have gained particular renown for their Legilimency abilities. Salazar Slytherin himself was said to possess remarkable skill in the mind arts, using his abilities to select students whose ambitions aligned with his vision for magical education. This suggests that the connection between Slytherin House and Legilimency extends back to the very founding of Hogwarts. In the 17th century, the Norwegian wizard Gunnar Olafsson became known as the Mind's Mirror for his unparalleled ability to extract complete, perfectly detailed memories from subjects. His techniques were so precise that the Wizengamot occasionally employed him to verify witness testimony in particularly complex cases, an early form of magical forensics that raised significant ethical debates within the ministry. The infamous Dark Witch Darla Blackthorn, who terrorized magical communities in the American South during the 1830s, twisted Legilimency into a tool of control and manipulation. By repeatedly invading the minds of her victims, she could plant suggestions and alter perceptions, creating a form of mental bondage that made those under her influence believe they acted of their own free will. Her case prompted the Magical Congress of the United States to classify unauthorized Legilimency as a serious magical offense, setting a precedent that many other magical governments would eventually follow. Yet, despite these historical abuses, Legilimency itself remains a neutral magical art, neither inherently good nor evil, but rather defined by the intentions of its practitioner. Consider the work of healer Imogen Wright at St. Mungo's during the dragonpox epidemic of 1904. As patients fell unconscious, beyond the reach of conventional diagnostic spells, Wright used gentle Legilimency to assess their symptoms and fears, tailoring treatments that saved countless lives. Her careful, compassionate application of the art demonstrates its potential for good when wielded with proper restraint. The technique of Legilimency involves magical theory of exceptional complexity. At its core lies the principle of magical resonance, the concept that all minds vibrate at specific magical frequencies. The Legilimens learns to attune their own mental frequency to match their target, creating a bridge between two consciousnesses. This delicate harmony allows thoughts and memories to flow across the connection, becoming perceptible to the practitioner. The physical sensations experienced during Legilimency can be attributed to this magical resonance. As the Legilimens establishes the connection, both participants feel the vibration of two minds coming into alignment. The resistance that creates pain during forced Legilimency occurs when the subject's mind instinctively tries to shift its frequency, breaking the connection. To understand the full spectrum of Legilimency, one must also consider its defensive counterpart, Occlumency. This sister discipline focuses on protecting the mind against invasion, creating mental barriers that prevent unwanted access to one's thoughts and memories. The relationship between these arts is symbiotic. Advances in one invariably lead to new developments in the other, creating an ongoing magical evolution spanning centuries. Occlumency techniques range from simple methods of mental distraction to the construction of elaborate false memories designed to mislead the invading Legilimens. The most skilled Occlumens can create layers of protection, allowing certain thoughts to be discovered, while keeping truly sensitive information buried beneath impenetrable mental shields. This complex interplay between invasion and defense forms one of the most fascinating aspects of the mind arts. In more recent history, few wizards have demonstrated mastery of Legilimency equal to that of Lord Voldemort. His ability to extract information from even unwilling minds made him a particularly terrifying adversary during both wizarding wars. Those who experienced his mental invasion described it as brutal and painful, like knives piercing the mind as he tore through mental defenses with cold precision. Albus Dumbledore, too, possessed considerable skill in Legilimency, though his application differed dramatically from Voldemort's. Dumbledore's approach was characterized by subtlety and restraint. Those subjected to his Legilimency often remained unaware of the gentle touch of his mind against theirs. He used this ability sparingly and with ethical consideration, primarily as a means of discerning truth when the stakes were highest. Severus Snape stands as perhaps the most interesting case study in the modern application of both legilimency and occlumency. His dual mastery allowed him to maintain his precarious position as a double agent during the Second Wizarding War. Snape's ability to selectively reveal thoughts to Voldemort while concealing his true allegiance represents perhaps the most impressive feat of mental discipline documented in recent wizarding history. The practical applications of legilimency extend far beyond its more dramatic uses in warfare and espionage. Within the Department of Mysteries, researchers study its potential for healing psychological trauma. At Gringotts, specially trained security wizards use limited forms of the art to detect deception during high-value transactions. Even in educational settings, carefully regulated legilimency techniques help identify students suffering from learning blocks caused by negative magical experiences. The Ministry of Magic maintains strict regulations governing the practice of legilimency. Unauthorized use against another witch or wizard without their consent is classified as a serious magical offense under the Mental Sovereignty Act of 1743, with penalties ranging from substantial fines to imprisonment in Azkaban for particularly egregious violations. However, enforcement presents significant challenges, as detecting subtle uses of the art often proves nearly impossible without witnesses or confession. Licensed legilimens undergo rigorous training and ethical screening before receiving ministry certification. These individuals typically work in specialized fields such as magical law enforcement, healing, or diplomatic services where their abilities serve the greater wizarding good under careful oversight. Even with these protections in place, many in wizarding society view registered legilimens with a mixture of respect and unease. The ethics of legilimency remain a subject of ongoing debate within wizarding philosophical circles. Questions of consent, privacy, and the potential for abuse inform discussions about appropriate limitations on the art. Some magical theorists advocate for stricter regulations, while others argue that over-regulation merely drives the practice underground, where it becomes more dangerous without proper oversight. Practical training in legilimency follows a progression of increasing complexity. Beginners typically start with exercises focused on detecting surface emotions, the simplest form of mental information to access. As they advance, students learn to perceive clear, current thoughts before eventually developing the skills necessary to navigate deeper memories and subconscious knowledge. The most advanced practitioners can sift through decades of memories with precision, locating specific information without damaging the delicate mental landscape they explore. This level of mastery requires not only magical talent, but also exceptional emotional intelligence and self-control. Without these qualities, even the most technically proficient legilimens risks becoming lost in the minds they enter, or causing unintentional harm to their subjects. For those experiencing legilimency, the sensation differs based on their own magical sensitivity and awareness. Muggles typically perceive nothing beyond a strange feeling of being carefully observed. Magical individuals with no training in mental defense might experience brief disorientation or the curious sensation of memories bubbling to the surface of their thoughts. Those with some awareness of the mind arts might detect the presence of another consciousness touching their own, an unmistakable awareness of no longer being alone within the privacy of their mind. As our exploration of legilimency draws to a close, we must acknowledge the profound questions this magical art raises about the nature of privacy, truth, and trust within wizarding society. In a world where thoughts can be accessed by those with the skill to do so, what truly remains private? How does the possibility of mental invasion shape interactions between magical individuals? These questions have no simple answers, but they invite us to consider the unique moral complexities that magic introduces to human relationships. The gentle crackling of our fire reminds us that even in discussing such an invasive magic, we remain in a space of safety and reflection. As shadows lengthen and your thoughts begin to drift, consider this. If your mind were a landscape with mountains of memories and valleys of dreams, what pathways would you most carefully guard, and which would you willingly share with those you trust? In the vulnerability of that answer lies the true power and danger of Legilimency. Chapter 3. The Medieval Architecture of Godric's Hollow. As twilight settles over our discussion like a velvet cloak, and the flames cast dancing shadows across ancient stones, let us turn our attention to a place where history and magic have intertwined for over 1,000 years. The medieval architecture of Godric's Hollow, one of Britain's most significant wizarding settlements. Nestled in the rolling hills of the West Country, Godric's Hollow presents itself to the casual observer as merely another charming English village. Its winding lanes, stone cottages, and ancient church seem unremarkable to Muggle visitors, who find themselves inexplicably comforted by the place without understanding why. Yet beneath this quaint facade lies a settlement of profound magical significance, its very stones resonating with centuries of wizarding history. The village dates back to the early medieval period, with archaeological evidence suggesting settlement as early as the 8th century. However, it was during the 10th century that the village gained its name and magical significance, when Godric Gryffindor, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, established his home there. The village that grew around his dwelling became known as Godric's Hollow, a name that has remained unchanged for over 1,000 years. Imagine walking through the village as it appeared in those early days. The central square, now paved and adorned with a war memorial, was once a simple clearing where local witches and wizards would gather for seasonal celebrations. Gryffindor's original dwelling stood near this space, a structure combining Anglo-Saxon timber framing with Norman stone elements, reflecting the transitional architectural period of its construction. While Gryffindor's original home no longer stands, archaeological studies conducted by the Department of Magical History and Preservation have uncovered its foundations. The dwelling was considerably larger than contemporary Muggle homes, featuring a central hall measuring nearly 60 feet in length. Analysis of the remaining stone elements reveals intricate protective runes carved into the foundation, early examples of architectural warding that would later become standard practice in wizarding construction. As the village grew throughout the 11th and 12th centuries, it developed a distinctive architectural character that blended magical and Muggle building techniques. Stone became the predominant building material, partly due to its durability, but also because of its superior capacity to hold enchantments. Unlike wood, which absorbs and eventually disperses magical energy, properly prepared stone can maintain spells for centuries, a quality early wizarding architects exploited extensively. The oldest surviving structure in Godric's Hollow is the parish church of St. Clementine, dating from approximately 1080 CE. Its Norman architecture features the rounded arches and thick walls characteristic of the period, but careful observers might notice subtle differences from other churches of similar age. The proportions adhere precisely to arithmetically significant ratios, and the alignment of the building follows not just Christian tradition, but also ancient magical principles governing the flow of natural energies. Within the church, now shared by both Muggle and magical worshippers, several architectural features serve distinctly magical purposes while remaining undetectable to non-magical visitors. The rose window above the altar, with its intricate stone tracery, functions as a complex runic array that strengthens the natural magical barriers around the village. The carved wooden ceiling bosses, appearing to Muggles as traditional religious symbols, form a protective constellation when activated by the light of the winter solstice. Beyond the church, the medieval cottages of Godric's Hollow represent one of Britain's finest collections of early wizarding vernacular architecture. Unlike the grand constructions of purely magical settlements like Hogsmeade, these dwellings were designed to blend seamlessly with Muggle buildings while incorporating subtle magical elements. A prime example can be found in what is now known as Bathilda Bagshot's house, a 13th-century cottage that exemplifies this dual-purpose design. From the outside, it appears as a typical medieval dwelling with a timber frame, wattle and daub walls, and a thatched roof. However, The interior reveals the true ingenuity of early wizarding architects. The main beams are carved with expansion charms that create significantly more space than the exterior dimensions would suggest. The central hearth incorporates a permanent flame-freezing charm, preventing accidental fires while maintaining the Muggle appearance of a normal fireplace. The windows of these medieval cottages deserve particular attention. Early glass was prohibitively expensive for common dwellings, but wizarding builders developed techniques to create glass-like barriers using solidified air enchantments. These windows allowed light to enter while keeping out the elements, appearing to Muggle visitors as normal glass or oiled parchment depending on the period. Several cottages in the village still maintain these ancient enchantments, their crystalline quality giving away their magical nature to knowledgeable observers. Perhaps the most fascinating architectural feature of medieval Godric's Hollow was its network of magical passageways. Unlike the obvious secret passages of Hogwarts, these pathways were integrated seamlessly into the village layout. A certain sequence of steps taken along the village's main lane would temporarily reveal doorways to underground chambers where the magical community could gather in secrecy. The lintels of specific cottages, when tapped in the correct pattern, would create bridges of light visible only to magical folk, allowing rapid transit across the village during times of danger. The cobblestone patterns in the village square deserve mention for their remarkable magical engineering. Laid in the late 13th century, the stones form an elaborate runic array that serves multiple purposes. They absorb and redistribute magical energy throughout the settlement, prevent the formation of magical traces that might attract unwanted attention, and subtly encourage Muggle visitors to overlook any accidental magic they might witness. This last function, a precursor to modern Muggle-repelling charms, represents one of the earliest known examples of large-scale environmental enchantment. The medieval wizarding architects of Godric's Hollow were particularly skilled in creating structures that interacted harmoniously with natural magical energies. The village sits at the intersection of several ley lines, natural currents of magical force that flow through the earth. Rather than fighting against these energies or attempting to redirect them, the builders positioned key structures to channel and amplify them. The village church stands precisely at a ley line nexus, its tower functioning as a magical conductor that stabilizes energy fluctuations that might otherwise manifest as unpredictable magical phenomena. Water features played a crucial role in medieval magical architecture, and Godric's Hollow exemplifies this tradition. The village well, dating from the 12th century, appears mundane to Muggle eyes, but magical visitors can perceive the intricate runic carvings that line its interior. These runes interact with the water, imbuing it with properties that strengthen magical abilities when consumed. This enchanted water was particularly valued for its healing properties, drawing wizarding pilgrims from across Britain during medieval times. The boundaries of medieval Godric's Hollow were marked by a series of standing stones, most of which remain today, though their purpose has been forgotten by many. These monoliths, weathered by centuries of exposure, form a protective circle around the village core. Each stone contains a fragment of a master ward scheme, working in concert to create a barrier that warned of approaching danger and prevented hostile magic from penetrating the settlement. Historians believe this system was established during the witch hunts of the 13th century, providing the community with an early warning system against persecution. The architectural style of wizarding homes in Godric's Hollow evolved through the medieval period, reflecting broader trends while maintaining magical functionality. The half-timbered styles of the 14th and 15th centuries allowed for the integration of various magical woods, each chosen for specific properties. Oak beams provided stability and resistance to magical tampering, while rowan wood incorporated into window frames offered protection against dark forces. Ash was commonly used for door lintels, believed to facilitate the smooth transition between magical and non-magical spaces. Interior design in these medieval wizarding homes balanced practicality with magical convenience. Central hearths were enchanted for controlled cooking temperatures, while kitchen corners often featured permanent cooling charms for food preservation. Sleeping quarters, typically incorporated subtle calming enchantments woven into the rush matting or later wool carpets. Communal areas might include stones placed strategically within the flooring, creating ambient light when activated by a household member's footsteps. The most impressive architectural achievement of medieval Godric's Hollow, however, was its adaptive nature. Unlike purely magical settlements that remained frozen in time, the village evolved alongside its Muggle counterpart, adopting new styles and techniques while maintaining magical functionality. This adaptability allowed the wizarding community to remain hidden in plain sight, their homes appearing to age and develop naturally while the magical elements remained concealed within. By the late medieval period, Godric's Hollow had established architectural traditions that would influence wizarding construction throughout Britain. The principles of concealment, dual functionality, and harmonious integration with natural magic developed in this village spread to other mixed communities, creating a distinctly British approach to wizarding architecture that differs significantly from continental styles. The legacy of this medieval architectural tradition continued well into modern times, most visibly in the Potter Cottage, whose tragic destruction in 1981 revealed the enduring strength of ancient building techniques. Despite the catastrophic magical backlash following Voldemort's failed killing curse, the structure's medieval foundation and core walls remained intact, their protective enchantments still active centuries after their creation. Today, visitors to Godric's Hollow can still experience elements of its medieval magical architecture, though many features remain visible only to those with magical ability. The church, the square, and several original cottages stand as testament to the ingenuity of early wizarding builders who created spaces that served both magical and mundane purposes without compromising either. For magical historians and architectural scholars, Godric's Hollow represents an unparalleled example of how wizarding communities adapted to coexistence with Muggles during the formative medieval period. The solutions developed by those early builders, concealment through normalcy, dual-purpose design, and the subtle integration of magical elements, established patterns that would define wizarding architecture for centuries to come. As our exploration of Godric's Hollow's medieval architecture concludes, the fire's glow seems to take on the warm hue of ancient stones bathed in sunset. These buildings, standing through centuries of magical history, have witnessed the passage of many significant figures, from Godric Gryffindor himself to Albus Dumbledore, from generations of Peverells to James and Lily Potter. They stand as silent guardians of wizarding heritage, their stones holding memories that even the most powerful magic cannot extract. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you might ponder, what stories would these ancient walls tell if they could speak, and what forgotten magics might still linger in their foundations, waiting to be rediscovered by those who know how to listen to the whispers of stone and timber. Chapter 4. The Magic of the Pensieve. The silver light ripples like water, yet moves with the ethereal quality of neither liquid nor gas, something in between, something magical. As our evening continues and the shadows lengthen around us, let us delve into one of the most fascinating magical artifacts in wizarding history, the Pensieve, a vessel of memory and truth, where thoughts become tangible and the past becomes present once more. The Pensieve is among the rarest magical objects, its creation requiring exceptional skill in multiple magical disciplines. These shallow stone basins, typically adorned with runes and magical symbols along their rims, serve as repositories for extracted memories. Within their enchanted depths, memories can be stored, viewed, and examined from perspectives impossible in natural recollection. The earliest known Pensieve dates back to ancient Egypt, where the wizard Amenhotep created what he called the Pool of Remembrance around 1400 BCE. This primitive version was considerably larger than modern Pensieves, resembling a small reflecting pool rather than the basin-sized objects we recognize today. Hieroglyphs surrounding Amenhotep's creation suggest it was used primarily for preserving the memories of dying magical scholars, ensuring their knowledge would survive their physical passing. The term pensieve itself originated much later in medieval Britain. It combines the English word pensive, referring to deep or melancholy thought, with the Latin sieve, a tool for separating wanted elements from unwanted ones. This etymology reveals much about the object's purpose, to sort through and make sense of complex thoughts and memories, separating clarity from confusion. To truly understand the pensieve, one must examine the magical theory behind its creation. Unlike many enchanted objects that merely manipulate physical reality, the pensieve operates at the intersection of mind and matter, transforming thoughts, intangible and ephemeral by nature, into a substance that can be manipulated physically while retaining its mental essence. The basin itself must be carved from specific materials capable of holding this memory substance without degradation. The most effective pensieves are fashioned from moonstone, which naturally resonates with mental energies, or from silver-infused marble that has been exposed to lunar light for a full 13 cycles. These materials create a reservoir that can contain memories without absorbing or altering them, maintaining their integrity for potentially centuries. The runes etched around the rim serve multiple crucial functions. Some stabilize the memory substance, preventing it from dissipating back into mental energy. Others create the enchantment that allows viewers to enter and experience stored memories. Still others establish the magical boundaries that prevent a viewer from becoming permanently lost within another's recollections. Each rune must be carved with perfect precision. The slightest error could result in memories becoming corrupted, or viewers unable to return to their physical forms. The silvery substance that fills a pensieve, neither gas nor liquid, represents one of the most remarkable achievements in magical transmutation. When a witch or wizard extracts a memory using their wand, they are performing an extraordinarily delicate piece of magic. The spell separates the memory from the mind, while maintaining its complete integrity, converting mental energy into this unique physical-mental hybrid substance. This memory substance contains not just the visual and auditory elements of the memory, but also emotional context, sensory details, and the subtle impressions that form our complete experience of a moment. The extraction process itself requires considerable skill and concentration. The witch or wizard must focus intently on the specific memory they wish to remove, placing their wand tipped to their temple. As they draw the wand away, the memory follows, appearing as a silvery strand connecting wand to head before separating completely. This delicate procedure can go wrong if concentration wavers, incomplete memories might be extracted, or worse, essential mental connections might be damaged. For this reason, most wizards and witches approach memory extraction with great caution. Once extracted, the memory can be deposited into the pensieve, where it joins other stored memories as swirling silvery currents. These currents are not random, but follow patterns related to the emotional and thematic connections between different memories. Related recollections tend to flow together, while contradictory or emotionally opposed memories create distinctive boundaries and eddies visible on the surface. The most remarkable feature of the pensieve, beyond its ability to store memories, is the way it allows them to be experienced. By touching the silvery surface with their face or wand, a witch or wizard can enter the memory completely. Unlike simply recalling a memory in one's mind, the pensieve offers a full sensory experience. The viewer can see events from any angle, hear distant conversations, and move freely through the remembered scene. This freedom of perspective represents the pensieve's most valuable quality for serious magical research and investigation. When we naturally recall memories, we are limited to our original perspective and focus. Details outside our attention are typically lost or distorted. Within a pensieve memory, however, the entire scene is preserved with perfect fidelity. A viewer can notice elements the original memory maker missed entirely, overhear conversations that went unregistered by conscious attention, and observe subtle details that reveal new insights. The experiential nature of pensieve viewing creates some curious magical effects. While inside a memory, the viewer exists in a state between physical and mental presence. They cannot interact with or alter the memory in any way, Attempts to touch objects or speak to figures within the memory pass through like ghost-like apparitions, yet the experience feels entirely real, with all senses engaged. This paradoxical state of presence without influence has led magical philosophers to debate whether pensieve exploration represents a form of time travel, dimensional shifting, or something entirely unique. For those experiencing a pensieve for the first time, the sensation can be disorienting. The sudden transition from standing over the basin to falling through darkness before landing within the memory often causes momentary confusion. With practice, experienced users learn to maintain their awareness during this transition, mentally preparing themselves for the shift in perspective. While inside a memory, the viewer remains connected to the physical pensieve by a thin silver cord, visible only to them, that serves as their path back to reality. To exit the memory, one need only focus on this connection, and they will be drawn upward, returning to their physical body standing before the basin. This safety mechanism prevents users from becoming lost within memories, though historical accounts suggest this has occasionally happened when pensieves were improperly created or damaged. The ethical implications of pensieve use have been debated throughout wizarding history. Unlike Legilimency, which forcibly extracts thoughts from an unwilling mind, pensieve memories are willingly removed and shared. However, the depth of exposure they provide raises important questions about privacy. When someone shares a memory, they may not realize how many additional details beyond what they consciously noticed become accessible to the viewer. The legal status of pensieve memories as evidence has evolved over centuries. The modern Wizengamot recognizes that while pensieve memories cannot be fabricated in the way testimony might be, they are still subjective, colored by the emotions, beliefs, and perceptions of the original memory owner. Furthermore, skilled wizards can modify their own memories before extraction, though such tampering typically leaves magical traces detectable by expert analysis. Beyond their investigative and legal applications, pensieves serve valuable educational purposes. At Hogwarts, certain professors use them to show historical events that no living person witnessed, or to demonstrate complex magical phenomena difficult to replicate safely in a classroom. The Department of Mysteries maintains an extensive collection of memories from significant historical events, preserving important moments in wizarding history with a fidelity impossible in written accounts. Healers at St. Mungo's have developed therapeutic applications for pensieves, particularly in treating magical trauma, by extracting and reviewing painful memories in the objective environment of the pensieve. Patients can process traumatic experiences from a safer emotional distance. This technique has proven especially valuable in treating survivors of magical accidents who cannot clearly recall what happened due to the shock of the event. The creation of a pensieve represents such complex magic that few wizards or witches attempt it. Modern pensieves are typically ancient artifacts passed down through generations of magical families or institutions rather than newly crafted objects. The complete method of creation remains somewhat mysterious, with certain steps guarded as closely held secrets by the few artisans who maintain this magical tradition. What is known about pensieve creation involves a lengthy process spanning multiple lunar cycles. The base material must be quarried during a new moon and shaped during the waxing phase. Runes are carved under the full moon's light, and the final enchantments cast during the waning phase. Throughout this process, the creator must maintain specific mental states corresponding to each phase of creation, an extraordinary feat of concentration and magical discipline lasting weeks. The most famous pensieve in recent history belonged to Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts. His particular model featured unusually elaborate runic work around its rim and demonstrated exceptional stability, capable of holding hundreds of memories simultaneously without degradation. The origin of Dumbledore's pensieve remains unclear, though some scholars believe it may have been created by Rowena Ravenclaw herself, given certain stylistic elements consistent with her known magical creations. Dumbledore used his pensieve not just for storing excess thoughts, neither liquid nor gas, as he once described them, but as a critical investigative tool in understanding Lord Voldemort's history and vulnerabilities. By collecting and analyzing memories from those who encountered Tom Riddle throughout his life, Dumbledore pieced together the Dark Wizard's path toward immortality and the creation of his Horcruxes. This investigative approach demonstrates perhaps the most valuable application of Pensieves, their ability to reveal patterns and connections across multiple memories that might remain hidden when considering each recollection in isolation. By revisiting the same memories repeatedly or examining a series of related memories sequentially, subtle details emerge that transform understanding. The substance of memories within a Pensieve can be manipulated in ways impossible with natural recollection. Multiple memories can be blended to reveal thematic connections, or a single memory can be frozen at a crucial moment for extended examination. Advanced Pensieve users can even isolate specific elements within a memory, following a particular person through a crowded scene, for instance, or focusing on background details normally overlooked. Pensieves also preserve memories with perfect fidelity regardless of time. While natural memories fade, becoming less detailed and reliable with age, a properly extracted and stored memory remains as vivid and accurate centuries after its creation as on the day it was formed. This quality makes Pensieves invaluable for historical research, allowing modern wizards to experience ancient events through the eyes of those who witnessed them. For the original memory owner, the extraction process creates an interesting effect. The memory remains accessible to them, but becomes somewhat distant, like recalling something read in a book rather than personally experienced. This distance can provide emotional relief when dealing with traumatic recollections or clarity when analyzing complex situations. Once returned to the mind from the Pensieve, however, the memory regains its full emotional and experiential quality. While most commonly used for individual reflection or small group investigation, there exist rare examples of larger Pensieves designed for communal memory sharing. The Hall of Reflection at the International Confederation of Wizards headquarters contains such a device, a pool-sized Pensieve that allows diplomatic delegates to share cultural memories and historical perspectives, fostering understanding across magical traditions. These larger vessels require extraordinary magical maintenance to prevent memory corruption and typically limit the depth of immersion possible. There remain aspects of Pensieve magic not fully understood even by expert magical theorists. The precise mechanism by which consciousness enters a memory, the nature of the silver memory substance itself, and the long-term effects of frequent memory extraction all represent active areas of magical research. The Department of Mysteries maintains a dedicated chamber for Pensieve studies, though their findings remain largely classified. For the average witch or wizard, encountering a Pensieve remains a rare experience. Their scarcity and the specialized knowledge required for proper use mean most will never have the opportunity to extract or view memories in this remarkable way. Those who do often describe it as transformative, altering their understanding of memory itself and the subjective nature of experience. As the firelight flickers lower and our discussion of the Pensieve draws to a close, we might reflect on what this magical object reveals about wizarding values. The Pensieve represents a profound respect for memory and truth, an acknowledgement that our experiences shape us but need not confine us, and a recognition that perspective matters deeply in understanding any situation. These principles extend beyond magical practice into wisdom applicable to all aspects of life. The silver waters of memory swirl and settle as our exploration concludes. As your thoughts drift toward dreams, consider this. If you could place any memory from your life into a Pensieve and examine it from new angles, which would you choose? And what hidden truths might you discover when seeing it through eyes no longer limited by your original perspective? Chapter 5. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries. The darkness holds secrets, and nowhere in the wizarding world are secrets held more closely than in the shadowed halls beneath the Ministry of Magic. As our ember-lit conversation continues, let us venture into one of the most pivotal confrontations of the Second Wizarding War, the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. where prophecy and loss became intertwined in the endless night of hidden chambers. This battle marked a turning point, the moment when Lord Voldemort's return could no longer be denied by the wizarding authorities, when a small group of students faced the Dark Lord's most dangerous followers, and when the Order of the Phoenix emerged from the shadows to counter the growing darkness. But to understand the battle's significance, we must first understand the place where it occurred. Deep beneath London, far below the bustling offices of the Ministry of Magic, lies the Department of Mysteries, a place dedicated to studying the most profound and inexplicable aspects of existence. Here, unspeakables research the fundamental forces that shape reality: time, space, thought, death, and love. The department takes its name from the nature of this work, as those employed there are bound by magical oaths never to speak of their research outside its confines. The physical layout of the department reflects the enigmatic nature of its purpose. A circular chamber with identical black doors serves as its entrance, rotating at random intervals to disorient visitors. Beyond these doors lie specialized chambers dedicated to different branches of magical research, each containing wonders and terrors in equal measure. The department's defenses are legendary, designed not just to keep intruders out, but to confuse and entrap those who manage to breach its outer barriers. One chamber in particular, the Hall of Prophecy, would become the focal point of Voldemort's interest in the spring of 1996. This vast, cathedral-like space contains thousands of glass orbs, each holding a recorded prophecy. These prophecies can only be retrieved by those about whom they were made, a safeguard that would prove central to the events that unfolded. The origins of the battle lie in a prophecy made by Sybil Trelawney 16 years earlier, during her job interview with Albus Dumbledore at the Hogsheade Inn. This prophecy, only partially overheard by a Death Eater spy, spoke of a child with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, a child born as the 7th month died to parents who had thrice defied Voldemort. This incomplete information had led to the murders of James and Lily Potter and Voldemort's first downfall, but the Dark Lord remained ignorant of the prophecy's full contents. Upon his return to physical form in 1995, Voldemort became obsessed with hearing the complete prophecy, believing it would reveal how to overcome Harry Potter, who had already escaped him multiple times. However, the protective enchantments around the prophecy records prevented Voldemort from retrieving it himself. He needed Harry Potter to take it for him. This necessity birthed an elaborate deception. Using the mental connection that existed between himself and Harry, a connection created when his killing curse rebounded years before, Voldemort began sending false visions to the young wizard. These visions culminated in an image of Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, being tortured in the Department of Mysteries. Imagine the scene at Hogwarts, as Harry's desperation grew. Having already lost his parents, the prospect of losing Sirius, the closest thing to family he had, was unbearable. Despite warnings from Hermione Granger about potential deception, Harry's sense of urgency was overwhelming. With the belief that Dumbledore was absent from the school and direct communication with Sirius impossible, Harry made the fateful decision to go to the ministry himself. 5 of his fellow students insisted on accompanying him: Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley, Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood, and Ginny Weasley. Their journey to London, flying on the Strals, winged horses visible only to those who have witnessed death, was itself remarkable. Picture these 6 students soaring invisibly above the English countryside as dusk settled, determination overcoming their fear, unaware they were flying toward a carefully laid trap. The Ministry of Magic stood eerily empty when they arrived, the usual bustle of officials and magical activity replaced by echoing silence. The group made their way downward, passing through the grand atrium with its peacock blue ceiling and golden symbols, into the depths where the Department of Mysteries waited. The ordinary lifts gave way to a plain black corridor leading to a single black door, the entrance to the department. Beyond this threshold, confusion began immediately as the circular entrance chamber rotated, disguising which door they had entered through and which might lead to Sirius. Through trial and error, the and navigated this disorienting space, passing through rooms containing extraordinary magical phenomena, a chamber of dancing lights that proved to be planets, a room containing a veil between life and death, another filled with strange aquatic brains in tanks. When they finally reached the Hall of Prophecy, its vastness was stunning, shelf after shelf, extending into darkness, each holding hundreds of small glass orbs, emitting a faint, ghostly light. The numbered rows stretched before them like a bizarre library catalog. Row 97, where Harry believed Sirius was being held, stood empty, the first confirmation that something was wrong. While searching, Harry discovered a prophecy orb bearing his name alongside Lord Voldemort's. This moment of discovery marked the trap springing as Death Eaters emerged from the shadows surrounding the students. Led by Lucius Malfoy, their objective became clear. They wanted Harry to hand over the prophecy, having lured him there specifically to retrieve what Voldemort could not. Surrounded by a dozen Death Eaters, including some of Voldemort's most dangerous followers, Bellatrix Lestrange, Antonin Dolohov, and Augustus Rookwood among them, the students appeared hopelessly outmatched. Yet what followed demonstrated remarkable courage and quick thinking. On Harry's signal, the students shattered the surrounding shelves with reductor curses, creating chaos as thousands of prophecy orbs fell and broke, releasing their spectral contents in a bewildering cacophony of voices. In the confusion, they fled, though they became separated in the process. Different groups found themselves in different chambers of the department, each facing their own desperate battles. The Brain Room, where Ron was attacked by the strange aquatic organisms. The Time Room, with its bell jar causing a Death Eater's head to cycle between infant and adult forms. The Planet Room, where Luna and Ginny were pursued. Each space within the department became a bizarre battlefield. The most haunting confrontation occurred in the Death Chamber, a stone amphitheater containing a raised stone dais. Upon this dais stood an ancient stone archway, hung with a tattered black veil that swayed slightly despite the still air. This was the veil, a direct portal to the realm of death, studied by unspeakables for centuries. The whispering voices that emanated from beyond the veil could only be heard by those who had experienced the death of a loved one, creating a deeply personal experience for each person who encountered it. It was here, in this chamber dedicated to death's mystery, that the battle reached its crescendo. The students, injured but determined, found themselves cornered by the Death Eaters. Just when their situation seemed most desperate, members of the Order of the Phoenix arrived, alerted by Snape after Harry's cryptic warning before leaving Hogwarts. The ensuing duel was extraordinary, even by magical standards. Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Alistair Moody engaged the Death Eaters in a display of advanced magic rarely witnessed. Spells illuminated the dark chamber with flashes of light, ricocheting off stone walls and creating a chaotic battlefield where concentration could mean the difference between life and death. Amid this chaos, Sirius Black faced his cousin, Bellatrix Lestrange. Their duel was particularly fierce. Family members on opposite sides of the magical divide, each representing the extremes of their shared bloodline. Sirius fought with a curious blend of recklessness and skill, even laughing as he ducked Bellatrix's jets of red light. His taunt, "Come on, you can do better than that," was followed immediately by another spell from Bellatrix that struck him squarely in the chest. The arc of Sirius's fall through the veil remains one of the most haunting moments of the entire war. Time seemed to slow, as his expression shifted from laughter to shock, his body curving gracefully backward through the tattered curtain. And then, nothing. No impact. No fallen body. Just absence where a man had been moments before. The finality of this passage, unlike any death previously witnessed, left no possibility of recovery or return. Harry's reaction, raw, immediate grief transforming into burning rage, led to his pursuit of Bellatrix into the Ministry's atrium. Their confrontation there, with Harry attempting his first unforgivable curse in a moment of blinding anger, demonstrated how thin the line between justice and vengeance can become in war's emotional crucible. It was here, in the polished wood and peacock blue ceiling of the atrium, that Voldemort himself finally appeared, drawn by Bellatrix's call. His duel with Dumbledore, who arrived moments later, stands as one of the most extraordinary magical contests ever recorded. Two of the most powerful wizards of the age engaged each other with spells of such complexity and force that the very elements bent to their will. Water rose from the Ministry fountain to shield and attack. Fire took the form of a serpent. Glass from shattered windows was transformed into deadly projectiles before being turned to sand. The magic displayed went beyond standard combat spells into the realm of elemental transfiguration and conjuration, magic that shaped reality itself rather than merely affecting what already existed. Perhaps most remarkable was Voldemort's brief possession of Harry in the battle's final moments. Finding himself unable to defeat Dumbledore through conventional means, the Dark Lord attempted to use Harry as both shield and weapon, entering the young wizard's mind and body. The agony Harry experienced during this possession was beyond physical pain, a spiritual violation that tested the limits of human endurance. Yet it was this possession that ultimately failed, not because of magical resistance, but because of something Voldemort could neither understand nor tolerate: Harry's capacity for grief and love. The very emotions the Dark Lord dismissed as weakness became his undoing, making Harry's mind an environment so hostile to Voldemort's presence that he could not maintain the possession. As Ministry officials began arriving, drawn by the commotion, Voldemort disappeared, but not before being witnessed by the Minister for Magic himself, Cornelius Fudge, who had spent the previous year in aggressive denial of the Dark Lord's return. This moment of undeniable truth shattered the Ministry's official position and forced a public acknowledgement of the danger facing the wizarding world. The battle's aftermath rippled through magical society. The Ministry, forced to abandon its campaign against Dumbledore and Harry, began preparing for open warfare. The Prophet, which had spent months ridiculing claims of Voldemort's return, reversed its position overnight. Security measures intensified across Wizarding Britain as the truth, however unwelcome, was finally acknowledged. For those directly involved, the personal consequences were profound. The Order of the Phoenix lost Sirius Black, a dedicated fighter and Harry's last connection to his parents. Several students suffered serious injuries, Hermione from a particularly nasty curse cast by Antonin Dolohov, Ron from the strange brain creatures that left scars on his arms, Neville with a broken nose and wand. Beyond physical injuries, all carried psychological wounds, the loss of innocence that comes from facing mortality and malevolence directly. The Death Eaters suffered a significant setback as well. Many of Voldemort's inner circle were captured, including Lucius Malfoy, whose standing with the Dark Lord plummeted as a result. The prophecy, Voldemort's primary objective, was destroyed without his learning its contents. Perhaps most damaging was the loss of secrecy. With his return publicly acknowledged, Voldemort lost the advantage of operating in the shadows, while the Ministry remained in denial. The Department of Mysteries itself, that labyrinth of magical research, sustained considerable damage. The Hall of Prophecy, with its centuries of collected predictions, was largely destroyed. Other chambers suffered varying degrees of damage from stray spells and the chaos of combat. The Unspeakables, notoriously secretive about their work, never publicly commented on how the battle affected their research. From a strategic perspective, the battle represented both failure and success for both sides. Voldemort failed to obtain the prophecy, but succeeded in luring Harry into danger. The Order prevented the prophecy from falling into enemy hands but lost Sirius and revealed themselves publicly. The Ministry's position was undermined, but this forced a necessary acknowledgement of reality that, however painful, allowed preparation for the coming conflict. For Harry personally, the battle marked a profound transition. Beyond the devastating loss of Sirius, he finally learned the prophecy's contents directly from Dumbledore after returning to Hogwarts. The knowledge that he was destined either to kill Voldemort or be killed by him, neither can live while the other survives, placed an unimaginable burden on the shoulders of a 15-year-old boy already dealing with trauma and grief. The magical community's understanding of this battle came primarily through second-hand accounts, as the Department of Mysteries remained restricted even after the events became public knowledge. This created a mythic quality around the confrontation, with various versions circulating that emphasized different aspects of what occurred. Some focused on Dumbledore's extraordinary magic, others on the students' bravery, still others on the mystery of the veil that claimed Sirius Black. Years later, historians of the Second Wizarding War would identify the Battle of the Department of Mysteries as the clear delineation between the war's covert and overt phases. Before the battle, Voldemort operated through proxies and manipulation. Afterward, direct confrontation became increasingly common, culminating eventually in the open takeover of the Ministry itself. For the 6 students who entered the department that night, the experience forged bonds that would prove crucial in the difficult years ahead. Their success in standing against Death Eaters, surviving and even fighting effectively, despite being dramatically outmatched, built a foundation of confidence and trust that would later manifest in resistance efforts like Dumbledore's army. The battle also revealed something about prophecy itself, the curious way predictions shape events while being shaped by them. Had Voldemort never heard the partial prophecy, he would never have attacked the Potters, never created his own nemesis in Harry, and never become obsessed with hearing the prophecy's entirety. The very act of trying to prevent a prophecy led directly to its fulfillment, revealing the complex relationship between fate and choice in the magical world. As our discussion of this pivotal battle draws to a close, the fire's embers glow like the prophecy orbs in their dusty shelves, holding whispered secrets of what might be. The Department of Mysteries, with its study of existence's fundamental questions, reminds us that even in a world of magic, some things remain beyond complete understanding: time, thought, death, and perhaps most mysteriously, love. The battle fought in those shadowed chambers demonstrated the power of these forces when they collide. How love drove Harry to the Ministry to save Sirius. How death, embodied in the veil, claimed him instead. How time would reveal the full significance of that night's events as the war unfolded, and how the thoughts and choices of individuals shaped outcomes no prophecy could fully predict. As sleep begins to call you into its own mysterious realm, consider this question: if the greatest magical minds dedicate their lives to understanding the fundamental forces of existence within the Department of Mysteries, what mysteries might exist in your own heart that would prove equally worthy of such dedicated exploration? Chapter 6. The Childhood of Neville Longbottom. The soft patter of rain against ancient window panes accompanies our next tale. A story not of grand battles or powerful artifacts, but of a quiet childhood shaped by absence and expectation. In the gentle shadows of our evening, let us explore the formative years of Neville Longbottom, a boy who grew up in the long shadow of heroes he could barely remember, carrying a legacy too heavy for young shoulders. Neville Frank Longbottom was born on July 30th, 1980, just one day before Harry Potter. This proximity of birth dates would prove significant, as both boys fit the criteria of the prophecy that would shape their lives. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. Had Lord Voldemort interpreted the prophecy differently, it might have been Neville marked as his equal rather than Harry, a divergence of fate determined by choice rather than destiny. Neville's early infancy was brief and ordinary, spent in a home filled with the love of his parents, Frank and Alice. These first months remain preserved only in photographs, images of a round-faced baby held by smiling parents who could not know how little time they had left together. For when Neville was just 16 months old, the attack that would define his childhood occurred. In the aftermath of Voldemort's fall, a group of Death Eaters led by Bellatrix Lestrange tortured Frank and Alice Longbottom into insanity, believing they had information about their master's whereabouts. The brutality of this attack left the Longbottoms alive, but permanently damaged. confined to the long-term care ward at St. Mungo's Hospital. Neville, too young to understand or remember, lost his parents without their actually dying, a peculiar grief without closure that would color his entire childhood. Following this tragedy, Neville's grandmother, Augusta Longbottom, assumed guardianship of her grandson. The Longbottom family home, a stately old manor house in Yorkshire, became Neville's world. Picture the young boy growing up in these surroundings. High-ceilinged rooms, filled with antique furniture, too valuable to play on, gardens too formal for childish games, and everywhere, the stern gaze of Augusta Longbottom, determined to raise her grandson to be worthy of his parents' sacrifice. Augusta herself was a formidable witch of the old school, already elderly when she unexpectedly became a primary caregiver. She approached child-rearing with the same rigid dignity that characterized everything she did. Her tall, severe figure, often topped with the infamous vulture-adorned hat, cast a long shadow over Neville's early years. While never cruel, she was not naturally nurturing, and her methods of raising Neville focused more on instilling proper wizarding values than on building his confidence or nurturing his unique qualities. In Augusta's defense, she faced an enormously difficult task. Raising a child who had suffered such trauma while managing her own grief over her son and daughter-in-law would challenge anyone. Moreover, she carried the weight of magical society's expectations for the Longbottom heir. The Longbottoms were an old, respected, pure-blood family, and Augusta was determined that Neville would uphold their traditions and honor his parents' legacy. This legacy proved a heavy burden for young Neville. Augusta kept Frank and Alice's room exactly as they had left it, a shrine to their absence that Neville was regularly taken to visit. She spoke of them constantly, not as they had been, warm, funny, occasionally fallible human beings, but as near mythic figures of perfect courage and ability. Your father could produce a perfect shielding charm by the time he was 9, she might remark, when Neville struggled with simple spells. Or your mother was top of her herbology class without even trying, when he showed interest in plants. These comparisons, however well-intentioned, created an impossible standard against which Neville constantly measured himself, and always found wanting. How could a child, particularly one who, as we shall see, struggled with magical confidence, possibly live up to idealized heroes who could no longer make mistakes or show weakness? Compounding this pressure was the worrying fact that for many years, Neville showed very little evidence of magical ability. In most wizarding families, accidental magic manifests in young children during moments of strong emotion, objects flying across rooms during tantrums, hair changing color when embarrassed, falling without injury when frightened. These incidents, while sometimes troublesome, reassure families that their child possesses magical ability. For Neville, such incidents were notably rare. This led to genuine concern among his extended family that he might be a squib, a non-magical child born to wizarding parents. In pure-blood families like the Longbottoms, this possibility carried significant social stigma, adding yet another layer of anxiety to Neville's childhood. His great-uncle Algy took particular interest in this problem, devising increasingly alarming methods to force magical manifestation. On one occasion, he pushed Neville off Blackpool Pier, nearly drowning him. On another, more notorious incident when Neville was 8, Uncle Algy dangled him by his ankles from an upstairs window. When distracted by the offer of meringue, he accidentally dropped the boy. Yet instead of tragedy, the family finally received confirmation of Neville's magic when he bounced safely down the garden path. The relief this incident brought illustrates the peculiar values of certain wizarding families. Rather than seeing these tests as the dangerous, traumatic experiences they were, Neville's family celebrated them as the means by which his magic was finally proven. Even Neville himself, lacking other models of family interaction, accepted this treatment as normal, even expressing gratitude when describing these events years later. Despite these challenges, Neville's childhood had moments of solace. The Longbottom Gardens became his refuge, a place where Augusta's strict supervision relaxed somewhat. Among the plants, Neville discovered his first true affinity. Magical plants responded to his gentle touch and patient care, thriving under his attention in a way that made him feel competent and needed. This early interest in herbology provided rare moments of pride and accomplishment in a childhood otherwise marked by perceived inadequacy. Another source of comfort came through regular visits to St. Mungo's to see his parents. Though profoundly sad, these visits established a routine connection that, however limited, mattered deeply to Neville. His mother, Alice, developed a habit of giving him empty Drubel's best-blowing gum wrappers during these visits, a small, repetitive gesture that represented one of the few direct interactions she could manage. Neville kept every wrapper, treasuring these tokens that others might see as rubbish because they formed a tangible link to the mother who could not express her love in conventional ways. Neville's childhood social circle remained quite limited. Unlike children raised in wizarding villages like Ottery St. Catchpole or Godric's Hollow, the Longbottom estate stood relatively isolated. Augusta, protective and somewhat traditional, didn't arrange many playdates with other wizarding children. Consequently, Neville grew up with limited peer interaction, contributing to his shyness and social awkwardness in later years. His educational preparation before Hogwarts followed traditional pure-blood practices. Augusta employed tutors to teach Neville reading, writing, basic arithmetic, and wizarding history and culture. These lessons often emphasized pure-blood traditions and the accomplishments of notable Longbottom ancestors, reinforcing Neville's sense of falling short of family expectations. His struggles with concentration and memory, which would later affect his academic performance at Hogwarts, were already evident during these early lessons, earning him frequent criticism from both tutors and his grandmother. The arrival of his Hogwarts letter when he turned 11 brought mixed emotions for Neville. While validation that he possessed sufficient magic to attend the school was welcome, the prospect of leaving his structured home environment for the complicated social world of Hogwarts terrified him. Augusta's parting gift, his father's wand, added yet another layer of pressure. The wand, which had performed remarkable magic in Frank Longbottom's capable hands, would prove an ill match for Neville, though none recognized this problem until much later. Before we follow Neville to Hogwarts, we must consider the psychological impact of his unusual childhood. Growing up in the shadow of parents who were simultaneously present and absent created a unique form of grief. Unlike Harry Potter, who lost his parents completely and could build idealized images of them, Neville regularly visited the physical shells of his parents without experiencing the emotional nurturing they would have provided. This liminal loss, neither complete nor healable, left him in a state of perpetual mourning for a relationship he could barely remember having. His grandmother's well-intentioned but rigid parenting style reinforced Neville's sense of inadequacy rather than building his confidence. When children are primarily praised for living up to external standards rather than for their intrinsic qualities and efforts, they develop what magical psychologists call conditional self-worth, valuing themselves only when meeting others' expectations. This pattern became evident in Neville's constant self-deprecation and expectation of failure. The dangerous tests of his magic, conducted by relatives, while normalized within certain wizarding traditions, would be considered abusive by contemporary standards. The anxiety these experiences generated likely contributed to Neville's nervous disposition and his difficulty performing magic under pressure. When every magical attempt carries the weight of family approval or disappointment, the natural learning process becomes fraught with emotional complications. Yet, despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, Neville developed remarkable resilience. His childhood taught him to endure disapproval and disappointment without becoming bitter. He learned to find small joys and areas of competence, even within an environment that rarely celebrated his unique qualities. Most importantly, he developed a profound empathy for the suffering of others, having experienced his own form of isolation and loss. This empathy manifested in small ways during his early years. His careful tending of plants, his patience with his parents' limitations, his kindness toward the house elves, who helped maintain the Longbottom estate. These qualities, undervalued in a culture that prized magical talent and achievement, would later prove fundamental to Neville's growth into an extraordinary young man. Neville's relationship with his own magical ability during childhood deserves particular attention. Unlike many wizarding children who take magic for granted as a natural extension of themselves, Neville experienced his magic as something unreliable and external, a force he needed to prove himself worthy of possessing rather than an innate part of his identity. This perception created a self-fulfilling cycle of anxiety and magical underperformance that would follow him to Hogwarts. Augusta's focus on Neville living up to his father's legacy extended to her expectations for his Hogwarts house placement. The Longbottoms had traditionally been sorted into Gryffindor, the House of the Brave, and Augusta made clear her expectation that Neville would continue this tradition. For a boy who felt anything but brave, this created yet another opportunity for disappointment. His later placement in Gryffindor, while eventually proving appropriate, initially felt to Neville like a mistake the Sorting Hat would surely regret. The material circumstances of Neville's childhood were comfortable. The Longbottoms possessed sufficient wealth for him to never want for necessities or even reasonable luxuries. He grew up surrounded by the trappings of wizarding tradition, moving family portraits, enchanted heirlooms, and the quiet magic that maintains such households. Yet emotional comfort proved more elusive than material comfort in the austere Longbottom home. Neville's childhood bedroom reflected the contradiction of his upbringing, a space theoretically his own, but still subject to Augusta's standards of propriety. Imagine the room, immaculately maintained by house elves, decorated with traditional tapestries depicting famous wizarding battles rather than children's themes, bookshelves filled with improving magical texts alongside the few fantastical stories Neville actually enjoyed. His most treasured possessions, a curious magical plant or two, his collection of chocolate frog cards, the hidden box of gum wrappers from his mother, would be carefully placed in drawers or cupboards, out of Augusta's disapproving sight. His childhood diet consisted of traditional wizarding fare, prepared by house elves, according to recipes passed down through generations of Longbottoms. Augusta insisted on proper table manners and decorum during meals, which were served at precisely the same times each day. This rigid structure provided stability but little joy, contributing to Neville's later fondness for Hogwarts feasts, where abundance and celebration transformed eating from a duty to a pleasure. The wizarding toys and games available to Neville were limited by Augusta's sense of propriety. Educational games like Exploding Snap, which tested reflexes and memory, were permitted, while more frivolous entertainments were discouraged. His Trevor the Toad, later infamous for its frequent escapes at Hogwarts, was given to him by his great-uncle Algy after the bouncing incident, representing both a reward for showing magic and one of the few gifts chosen specifically to please Neville rather than to improve him. Holidays at the Longbottom home followed traditional wizarding customs with solemn dignity. Christmas brought formal family gatherings where young Neville was expected to recite wizarding carols and accept practical gifts with appropriate gratitude. Birthdays were marked with small ceremonies honoring his growth rather than boisterous celebrations. The contrast between these subdued observances and the festive atmosphere he would later experience at Hogwarts made school holidays particularly meaningful to Neville. Throughout his childhood, Neville maintained a curious reverence for his grandmother despite her criticism. He recognized, even as a young boy, that her strictness stemmed from her own grief and fierce love for her son. Augusta's determination that Frank and Alice's sacrifice would not be forgotten shaped her treatment of Neville, creating a relationship built more on respect than on easy affection. This complex dynamic would evolve significantly as Neville grew into his own strength, and Augusta gradually recognized the unique qualities he possessed. As we near the end of our exploration of Neville's early years, we should acknowledge the visits to his parents that punctuated his childhood. Typically occurring on holidays and special occasions, these visits followed a painfully predictable pattern. Augusta and Neville would arrive at St. Mungo's bearing small gifts, flowers perhaps, or Drubel's gum for Alice. The healers would greet them with professional compassion, tinged with the sadness that comes from witnessing long-term suffering. In the long-term care ward, Frank and Alice would show no recognition of their visitors, though Alice would sometimes approach Neville with her customary offering of a gum wrapper. Augusta would speak to her son and daughter-in-law, as if they could understand, updating them on Neville's progress and wizarding news, her voice maintaining its usual composure, even as tears sometimes betrayed her controlled facade. Neville, uncertain how to interact with these strangers who were supposedly his parents, would watch quietly, accepting his mother's gift with gentle hands, wondering what they might have been like before. The journey home from these visits always passed in heavy silence, Augusta lost in memories, Neville in questions he dared not ask. Back at the Longbottom estate, routine would resume, the visit rarely discussed, but lingering in the melancholy that settled over the house afterward. For Neville, these regular encounters with loss shaped his understanding of both family and sacrifice from an unusually young age. By the time his Hogwarts letter arrived in the summer of 1991, Neville Longbottom had developed into a nervous, forgetful boy with limited confidence in his magical abilities. His childhood had prepared him poorly for the social and academic challenges that awaited him at school. Yet beneath his awkward exterior lay qualities that would prove far more valuable than the magical prowess his grandmother prized. Compassion born from understanding suffering, perseverance developed through enduring chronic disappointment, and a quiet moral compass that recognized right from wrong with remarkable clarity. As Neville packed his trunk for Hogwarts, carefully placing his father's wand in a protective case and securing Trevor in a special carrier, he could not have imagined how his experiences would eventually lead him to stand alone against the Dark Lord himself. The transformation from the anxious boy leaving Augusta's protection to the young man who would lead Dumbledore's army in its darkest hour seemed impossible, yet the seeds of that courage were already present, waiting for the right conditions to grow. The firelight has dimmed as our story of young Neville concludes, casting gentle shadows reminiscent of the ones that shaped his early years. As you drift towards sleep, consider this: how much of who we become is determined by the shadows we grow up in, and how much by the inner light that learns to shine despite them. Perhaps Neville's journey from fearful child to courageous leader offers an answer worth contemplating in your dreams. Chapter 7. The Dangers of the Imperius Curse. The hearth's mellow light casts long shadows across our gathering place as we turn to one of the darkest aspects of magical power, the ability to control another's mind completely. Tonight, we explore the most insidious of the three unforgivable curses, the Imperius Curse, a magic that transforms free will into illusion and makes prisoners of its victims while leaving no visible chains. The Imperius Curse, Incantation Imperio, stands unique among the unforgivables. While the Cruciatus curse inflicts unbearable pain and the killing curse extinguishes life itself, the Imperius curse leaves its victims physically unharmed, yet fundamentally violated. It creates the most unsettling form of captivity imaginable, one where the prisoner may not even recognize their own imprisonment. The earliest documented use of mind control magic appears in ancient Persian texts dating to approximately 500 BCE. These accounts describe a spell called Farman Rava, or command magic, used by court wizards to ensure loyalty among palace guards. This primitive form required repeated application and worked imperfectly, yet established the magical principles that would evolve into the modern Imperius Curse. By medieval times, variations of mind control spells existed throughout the wizarding world. The Romans developed Voluntas Capio, will capture, while Norse wizards practiced Hugurstjorn, mind governance. These regional variations differed in specific technique, but shared a common purpose: to override another's will and replace it with the caster's commands. The standardized form we now recognize as the Imperius Curse emerged during the 13th century, attributed to the dark wizard Ralston the Ruthless. His refinement created a more powerful and subtle version, capable of maintaining control for extended periods and permitting complex commands beyond simple instructions. Ralston's innovation spread rapidly through dark magical circles, prompting the first legal prohibitions against its use. To understand the Imperius curse's unique danger, one must comprehend how it affects its victims. Unlike many spells that target the body, Imperio influences the mind directly, creating what magical neurologists call a bifurcated consciousness. The victim remains aware on some level, watching their actions as if from a distance while feeling powerless to resist. This awareness, trapped behind a wall of magical compulsion, creates the distinctive dreamlike state reported by those who have experienced and later recovered from the curse. The sensation of being under the Imperius curse has been described by survivors as a floating euphoria, a remarkable lightness where all worry and responsibility evaporate. Cares, concerns, and inhibitions drift away, replaced by a serene happiness. This pleasant sensation forms part of the curse's insidious nature. Unlike the Cruciatus, which victims desperately fight from the first moment of contact, the Imperius creates a state its victims may not wish to resist. From this tranquil mental space comes a voice, the caster's commands, experienced not as external orders, but as brilliant ideas emerging from the victim's own mind. Jump from the window feels not like a dangerous external suggestion, but like a wonderful inspiration. What could be more delightful than soaring through the air? The preservation instincts that would normally prevent such actions are suppressed beneath layers of artificial contentment and altered perception. The curse's effects manifest physically in subtle ways observable to trained healers. The pupils dilate slightly, eye movement becomes smoother than natural, and a characteristic delay occurs between question and response as the controlled individual processes how to answer within the parameters of their instructions. Most distinctive is a particular quality of movement, fluid yet mechanical, like a well-designed automaton rather than a person moving of their own volition. The magical mechanics of the Imperius curse involve complex interaction with the victim's neural pathways. The incantation Imperio establishes a magical connection between caster and target, a conduit through which commands flow directly into the recipient's consciousness. This connection can be maintained across considerable distances, allowing the controller to direct actions without remaining physically present. The strength of this connection depends on several factors. The caster's magical power and intent play significant roles. A half-hearted Imperio cast by a wizard of modest ability might be resisted by even an ordinary victim. Conversely, when cast with full conviction by a powerful witch or wizard, the curse creates bonds that even the most strong-willed individuals struggle to break. The victim's mental fortitude also affects susceptibility. Natural occlumens, those with innate resistance to mind-affecting magic, demonstrate greater immunity to the Imperius curse. Similarly, individuals with exceptionally strong willpower or highly disciplined minds can sometimes fight against the curse's effects, though rarely without specific training in resistance techniques. This possibility of resistance distinguishes the Imperius from the other unforgivables. No amount of mental fortitude can prevent the Cruciatus curse from causing pain, or the killing curse from taking life, but the Imperius can be overcome through what magical researchers call cognitive dissonance accumulation. As the victim performs actions increasingly contrary to their true nature, the dissonance between commanded behavior and genuine self gradually weakens the curse's hold. The duration of the Imperius curse varies dramatically based on circumstances. In its basic form, the connection requires periodic renewal, with the interval depending on the caster's power and the specificity of commands. Simple instructions like "guard this door" might last days without reinforcement, while complex commands requiring adaptation to changing circumstances demand more frequent renewal of the spell. However, particularly skilled practitioners can establish long-term control through repeated application. During the First Wizarding War, certain victims remained under Imperio for years, their true selves buried so deeply beneath layers of magical compulsion that recovery required months of specialized treatment at St. Mungo's. After being freed, the range of actions possible under Imperius extends to nearly anything physically possible for the victim. From simple tasks like delivering a package to complex behaviors like maintaining a false identity for months, the curse's versatility makes it particularly dangerous. The only consistent limitation appears to be actions that would result in the victim's immediate death, not from any moral constraint within the spell, but because such commands create maximal cognitive dissonance, triggering the strongest possible resistance. Legal history surrounding the Imperius curse reflects growing understanding of its profound violation of personal autonomy. Initially classified under general mind-affecting magic, it received specific prohibition in Britain through the Universal Magical Rights Convention of 1417, which established freedom of magical will as a fundamental right of all witches and wizards. By 1717, with the formation of the Ministry of Magic, the Imperius was officially designated an unforgivable curse, its use punishable by life imprisonment in Azkaban. This severe penalty acknowledges the curse's unique capacity for cascading harm. A single Imperio can cause damage far beyond the immediate victim. Consider the case of Broderick Hawksworth, a ministry official placed under Imperius during the 1975 Goblin banking crisis. While controlled, Hawksworth altered regulatory provisions that precipitated a financial collapse affecting thousands of wizarding families. The Dark Witch responsible for the curse directly committed only one illegal act, yet caused misery on a massive scale. The First Wizarding War saw the Imperius curse employed as a strategic weapon to an unprecedented degree. Lord Voldemort and his Death Eaters placed key individuals throughout wizarding society under Imperio, creating a network of unwilling spies and saboteurs. Ministry officials, journalists, shopkeepers, and others found themselves secretly controlled, their positions and access exploited without their knowledge or consent. This widespread use created a climate of paranoia that persisted long after Voldemort's initial defeat. Friends, colleagues, even family members might be acting under hidden influence, their familiar faces masking an enemy's control. The defense of "I was under the Imperius curse" became so common in post-war trials that determining genuine victims from those claiming the curse as an excuse for voluntary collaboration proved extraordinarily difficult. Among the most notorious cases was that of Lucius Malfoy, whose claim of having served Voldemort only while under Imperius influence secured his freedom after the First Wizarding War. The truth of his assertion remained contested for years, highlighting the profound evidentiary challenges these cases presented to magical law enforcement. Without reliable methods to verify past Imperius exposure, the justice system often relied on circumstantial evidence and character witnesses, creating opportunities for the guilty to escape punishment. The psychological impact on genuine Imperius victims extends far beyond the period of active control. After being freed, survivors typically experience what healers term autonomy anxiety, persistent doubt about whether their thoughts and choices are truly their own. Simple decisions become fraught with uncertainty as victims question whether they act from personal desire or lingering magical influence. More severe cases develop post-compulsion identity fragmentation, where the boundary between self and implanted directives blurs. Victims report feeling like strangers in their own minds, unable to trust their instincts or reconcile actions performed under the curse with their authentic personality. This disconnect can persist for years, requiring specialized therapeutic techniques developed by the Mental Adjustment Wing at St. Mungo's. The treatment protocol for Imperius victims evolved significantly following the First Wizarding War. Early approaches focused primarily on breaking the magical connection through counterspells and purging rituals. While effective at ending active control, these methods did little to address lasting psychological trauma. Modern treatment combines magical intervention with adapted forms of Muggle psychological techniques, particularly cognitive reconstruction therapy and guided Pensieve regression. Prevention of Imperius control represents an area of ongoing magical research. Various protective measures exist, though none offer perfect security. Certain amulets containing Demiguise hair demonstrate moderate shielding properties, temporarily disrupting the curse's establishment. More effective are environmental wards that detect mind-affecting magic within their boundaries, alerting potential victims to resist or bystanders to intervene. The most reliable protection, however, comes through the difficult discipline of Imperius resistance training. This specialized form of mental conditioning, once restricted to elite aurors, became more widely taught following the First Wizarding War. The training progressively exposes subjects to mild control influences, teaching recognition of the curse's distinctive mental sensation and techniques to generate the cognitive dissonance that weakens its hold. Harry Potter's remarkable natural resistance to the Imperius curse, demonstrated during Defense Against the Dark Arts training in his 4th year at Hogwarts, represents an exceptionally rare ability. Professor Moody, though later revealed as Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise, noted the unusual strength of will required to completely throw off the curse on first exposure. Most students achieved only partial resistance after extensive practice, highlighting Potter's extraordinary mental resilience. The ethical considerations surrounding Imperius resistance training remain contentious within wizarding educational circles. Critics argue that exposing students to an unforgivable curse, even in controlled conditions, normalizes its use and potentially violates magical consent principles. Proponents counter that first-hand experience provides the only effective defense against a curse that might otherwise control a victim for years without detection. The Imperius curse's effects on magical creatures vary significantly by species. Those with natural mental defenses, such as occlumens or creatures with inherent magical resistance like dragons, demonstrate greater immunity. Conversely, beings with collective consciousness structures, such as certain fairy species, show unique vulnerability. A single curse can sometimes cascade through entire communities through their natural mental connections. House elves present a particularly complex case study in Imperius dynamics. Their inherent magical binding to wizarding families creates a form of permanent limited compulsion that interacts unpredictably with the Imperius curse. In some documented cases, the contradiction between house elf binding and Imperio commands has resulted in severe magical backlash, injuring both the elf and the unauthorized controller. During the Second Wizarding War, countermeasures against Imperius infiltration became increasingly sophisticated. The Order of the Phoenix developed security questions based on personal memories unlikely to be known to controllers. The Ministry eventually adopted similar protocols, though only after the Imperius facilitated infiltration had already occurred. These verification systems proved imperfect, but provided some defense against the most obvious forms of magical impersonation. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Imperius curse is its potential for multi-generational harm. Children born to parents under long-term Imperio control often develop attachment disorders and magical regulation difficulties. The inconsistent parental behavior, fluctuating between natural personality when the curse temporarily weakens and commanded actions when it reasserts, creates profound developmental confusion. These children frequently require specialized support at Hogwarts and other magical schools, though many cases remain undiagnosed due to the stigma surrounding Imperius victimhood. The international legal status of the Imperius curse shows notable variation across magical jurisdictions. While universally restricted, the severity of consequences differs significantly. British magical law maintains the harshest stance with its unforgivable classification and mandatory life sentence. The Japanese ministry permits its use exclusively in mental health contexts for treating certain magical phobias, while the Uagadu tradition recognizes limited ceremonial applications under strict supervision. These variations reflect broader cultural differences in how magical societies balance personal autonomy against collective security. From a philosophical perspective, the Imperius curse raises profound questions about the nature of magical consciousness. What constitutes the authentic self when thoughts and actions can be so completely manipulated? If someone under Imperio experiences genuine happiness while performing terrible acts, where does responsibility lie? These questions extend beyond academic debate into practical considerations of justice, rehabilitation, and the fundamental rights of magical beings. Recent magical research explores the controversial theory of Imperius echoes, subtle changes in personality and preference that persist long after the curse's magical signature disappears. These alterations, distinct from the psychological trauma of control, suggest the curse may create lasting changes to magical neural pathways. If proven, this theory would have significant implications for both treatment approaches and legal considerations surrounding post-Imperio behavior. As our exploration of this most troubling curse concludes, we should acknowledge the courage of those who have overcome its influence. From the anonymous ministry workers who gradually fought through its effects during the wars, to specific cases like Barty Crouch Sr., who briefly broke through decades of control, the human and magical spirit demonstrates remarkable resilience against even this most invasive form of magical subjugation. The fire has burned low now, casting more shadow than light across our gathering. These shadows serve as fitting metaphors for the unseen influence of the Imperius curse, present yet invisible, powerful yet intangible. As you drift toward sleep, consider this final question. In a world where thoughts can be implanted and actions controlled by external forces, what constitutes the inviolable core of personal identity that resists such manipulation, and how might we strengthen that essential self against all forms of unwanted influence, magical or otherwise? Chapter 8. The founding of Hogsmeade Village. The wind whispers tales of ancient days through the snow-dusted rooftops and winding lanes of a village that stands as the only entirely magical settlement in Britain. As our evening continues, let us journey back through the centuries to explore the origins of Hogsmeade, that quaint collection of shops and dwellings, nestled in the shadow of Hogwarts Castle, where generations of young witches and wizards have found respite, refreshment, and the simple joy of freedom beyond school walls. Hogsmeade's story begins not with grand ambition or careful planning, but with one wizard seeking solitude in the untamed Scottish Highlands. Historical records identify Hengist of Woodcroft as the village's founder, though the precise date of establishment remains debated among magical historians. Most scholarly consensus places the founding in the early medieval period, approximately the 10th century, making Hogsmeade roughly contemporaneous with the establishment of Hogwarts School itself. Hengist's journey to the remote Highland valley that would become Hogsmeade was prompted by necessity rather than choice. A skilled wizard from the fenlands of eastern England, Hengist faced increasing persecution from Muggle neighbors suspicious of his abilities. This period marked a challenging transition in magical Muggle relations, as the widespread acceptance of magic in ancient times gave way to growing fear and superstition in the early Christian era. Picture Hengist, a middle-aged wizard with a weather-worn face and practical robes, traveling northward with his meager possessions shrunk into a single enchanted pack. Behind him lay a burned cottage, suspicious neighbors, and the constant threat of discovery. Ahead stretched the wild beauty of Scotland, with its mist-covered mountains and deep, secretive valleys promising the one thing he desperately sought: safety. His journey took him through settlements and wilderness alike, each night spent in growing isolation as he moved farther from centers of human habitation. Contemporary accounts describe his relief upon discovering the hidden valley near the Great Black Lake, a place so remote and protected by natural barriers that Muggle travelers rarely ventured there. The presence of a small magical community already gathering around the newly established Hogwarts School offered the perfect environment for a wizard seeking both solitude and occasional magical company. Hengist built his first dwelling on what would later become the High Street of Hogsmeade, a simple timber structure with enchantments for warmth, water collection, and protection from both natural elements and unwelcome visitors. This modest beginning scarcely suggested the bustling village that would eventually grow around it. For several years, Hengist lived primarily as a hermit, venturing to Hogwarts occasionally to trade herbs and potions ingredients with the school's founding teachers. The transformation from isolated dwelling to nascent settlement began gradually. Other magical refugees, hearing rumors of a safe haven in the Highlands, sought out Hengist's sanctuary. A witch fleeing similar persecution established a small apothecary beside his home. A wandering magical craftsman, tired of disguising his work among muggles, built a workshop nearby. Slowly, a community formed, not through organized development, but through the natural gathering of those seeking freedom to practice magic openly. By the early 11th century, the settlement had grown sufficient to warrant a name. Hogsmeade combined the reference to the nearby school's emblematic animal with mead, an Old English term for meadow or pasture. The name reflected both the village's relationship to Hogwarts and the pastoral setting that characterized its early development. The symbiotic relationship between Hogsmeade and Hogwarts shaped the village's growth from its earliest days. The school provided a stable magical presence, intellectual resources, and eventually a stream of visitors in the form of staff and older students. The village, in turn, offered the school practical goods, services, and a vital connection to the wider wizarding world. This relationship was formalized during the tenure of Hogwarts' first headmistress after the founders, Edessa Sackendenberg, who established the tradition of allowing third-year and above students to visit the village on designated weekends. Her reasoning, preserved in school records from the 11th century, cited the educational value of supervised interaction with a functioning magical community and the practical benefits of permitting older students occasional respite from academic pressures. The early layout of Hogsmeade developed organically around natural features and practical considerations. The high street followed the natural contour of the valley, while side lanes emerged as needed, rather than through planned design. Magical dwellings of this period typically combined Muggle building techniques with protective enchantments, a practice reflecting the transitional era between open magical practice and the later need for complete secrecy. Archaeological exploration by the Department of Magical History and Preservation has uncovered foundations of these early structures beneath current buildings. Unlike later magical construction, these original dwellings show evidence of having been built largely by hand, with magic used primarily for reinforcement and comfort enchantments rather than for construction itself. A reminder that the levitation charm and other building-focused spells had not yet become standardized. The 12th century brought significant development to Hogsmeade with the establishment of what would become its most famous landmark, the Three Broomsticks. Originally a simple mead hall founded by the witch Hilda Broom, this establishment provided a gathering place for the growing community. The original structure, much smaller than the current inn, served primarily as a meeting point for local magical folk rather than the tourist destination it would later become. Magical governance in early Hogsmeade reflected the informal nature of wizarding society before the establishment of the Ministry of Magic. The village operated under a council of elders, typically the oldest or most magically accomplished residents, who settled disputes and organized communal resources. This council met in the back room of the Three Broomsticks, establishing the inn's tradition as a center of community affairs that continues to the present day. The village's economy in these early centuries centered around supporting Hogwarts and providing services to the magical community. Wandmakers, potion suppliers, magical tailors, and specialty food producers formed the commercial core. The relative isolation that made the location safe also necessitated self-sufficiency, with nearly every household maintaining gardens and livestock enhanced by agricultural magic that remains a distinctive feature of Highland wizarding traditions. Protective enchantments around Hogsmeade evolved as the settlement grew. The earliest defenses focused on deflecting Muggle attention rather than actively repelling it. Subtle confusion and misdirection charms that caused non-magical travelers to suddenly remember urgent business elsewhere, or to perceive only an unremarkable cluster of shepherds' huts. These early versions of what would later develop into Muggle-repelling charms represent some of the first community-wide magical protections in Britain, predating similar efforts in other wizarding settlements. The 13th century marked a turning point in Hogsmeade's development, as increasing witch hunts throughout Europe drove more magical refugees to seek safety in the remote village. This population growth transformed what had been little more than a hamlet into a proper village with specialized businesses, and more substantial structures. The influx of diverse magical traditions enriched the community's collective knowledge, introducing architectural styles and enchantments from continental Europe that can still be observed in some of the village's older buildings. During this period, the relationship between the village and school formalized further. Hogwarts began sourcing most of its supplies from Hogsmeade merchants, creating a stable economic foundation that allowed specialized magical businesses to flourish. School governors established a regular schedule for student visits, and certain shops began developing offerings specifically targeting this young clientele, the distant ancestors of Zonko's jokes and Honeyduke's sweets. The 14th century brought challenges as the Black Death devastated Europe. While witches and wizards possessed natural resistance to most Muggle diseases, the magical community was not entirely immune to the pandemic's effects. Hogsmeade, due to its isolation, suffered less than magical communities integrated with Muggle settlements, further cementing its reputation as a haven. During this period, the village served as a recovery center for afflicted magical families, with several residences temporarily converted to healing spaces, overseen by Hogwarts faculty. The village's physical expansion continued through medieval times, with distinct districts emerging for residential, commercial, and agricultural purposes. The path connecting Hogsmeade to Hogwarts, now known as the School Path, was established with protective enchantments to ensure safe passage for students and staff. Side lanes branched from the High Street to accommodate new construction, creating the charmingly irregular layout that characterizes the village today. Hogsmeade's architectural character developed during these centuries, establishing the distinctive style still visible in its oldest buildings. Half-timbered structures with steep pitched roofs, designed to shed Highland snow, predominated, with magical modifications for interior space expansion and weather resistance. Stone buildings began appearing for more prosperous establishments, particularly those requiring special protective measures like apothecaries and wandmakers' shops. By the 15th century, Hogsmeade had developed all major thoroughfares recognizable in its modern layout, though many currently familiar establishments remained in the future. The village center featured a small magical market square where seasonal gatherings occurred, particularly during solstices and equinoxes when magical energies peaked. Archaeological evidence suggests a circular arrangement of standing stones once occupied this space, serving as focal points for community magic before being replaced by more practical commercial structures as the village grew. The implementation of the International Statute of Secrecy in 1689 profoundly affected Hogsmeade, though perhaps less dramatically than other magical settlements more integrated with Muggle society. Already effectively hidden from non-magical observation, the village required relatively minor adjustments to comply with new magical concealment laws. The most significant change involved enhancing existing protective enchantments from mere diversion to complete concealment, rendering the entire settlement unplottable on Muggle maps. This period coincided with Hogsmeade's commercial golden age, as the village became a central trading hub for magical goods in northern Britain. The consolidation of magical society into hidden enclaves directed more business to established wizarding settlements, with Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley emerging as the two principal magical commercial centers in Britain. Specialty shops that had previously maintained Muggle-facing storefronts in larger towns relocated entirely to these hidden communities, bringing master craftspeople and rare magical services to the village. The 18th century saw Hogsmeade grow into its modern identity as both a functional wizarding village and a leisure destination. The Hogshead Inn opened during this period, providing an alternative gathering place that quickly developed its reputation for accommodating clientele and activities unwelcome at the more respectable Three Broomsticks. This century also marked the establishment of Scrivenshaft's quill shop, Gladrag's wizardware, and the first iteration of what would eventually become Zonko's joke shop. Perhaps most significantly for visiting Hogwarts students, the early 18th century saw the founding of Honeyduke's sweet shop by Ambrosius Flume's ancestors. The shop's immediate popularity among both villagers and students established the tradition of sweet-laden returns to the castle that continues to delight Hogwarts students today. The original Honeydukes, occupied a smaller premises nearer the edge of the village before relocating to its current position on the High Street in the 1850s. The gradual expansion of permissible student visit areas reflected Hogsmeade's growth. Initially, students were restricted to the High Street and immediately adjacent lanes. As the village established its reputation for safety, and as student supervision systems improved, the boundaries extended to include the full commercial district, and eventually the outskirts leading toward the mountains and the now infamous Shrieking Shack. Residential development in Hogsmeade followed a pattern common to wizarding settlements, with magical families often maintaining the same property for many generations. Unlike Muggle villages, where economic pressures frequently forced population turnover, the magical longevity and prosperity of established wizarding families created extraordinary stability in Hogsmeade's residential composition. Several current village families can trace their Hogsmeade residence back 5 centuries or more, their homes expanded and modified through generations rather than rebuilt. The 19th century brought modernization to Hogsmeade with the introduction of magical services reflecting wider developments in wizarding society. The village post office, with its impressive owl roster organized by delivery distance, opened in 1823. Dervish and Bonjis established its shop for magical equipment repair in 1875. The Hogsmeade branch of Gringotts, though smaller than its Diagon Alley headquarters, began providing banking services to the northern wizarding community in 1891. Transportation connections improved significantly during this period. The Hogsmeade railway station, built to accommodate the Hogwarts Express when that service began in the 1830s, created a new gateway to the village. Though primarily serving the school, the station provided Hogsmeade with direct connection to wizarding London, facilitating trade and enhancing the village's position as northern Britain's magical centre. By the early 20th century, Hogsmeade had assumed the form familiar to contemporary visitors, with all major establishments in their current locations. The village's population stabilized at approximately 300 permanent magical residents, supplemented regularly by Hogwarts staff and students during term time, and by magical tourists during holiday periods. The village weathered both wizarding wars with remarkable resilience, though not without casualties and damage. During the First Wizarding War, Hogsmeade's proximity to Hogwarts, widely considered the safest location in wizarding Britain under Albus Dumbledore's protection, provided significant security. Enhanced protective enchantments and regular patrols by Order of the Phoenix members maintained relatively normal village life, despite the conflict raging through wider magical society. The Second Wizarding War proved more directly threatening, particularly after Dumbledore's death removed Hogwarts' principal protection. Death Eater influence extended to Hogsmeade, with increased surveillance, a strictly enforced curfew, and the constant presence of dark wizards monitoring movement between the village and school. The Hogshead Inn became a center of covert resistance, with proprietor Aberforth Dumbledore providing critical support to Hogwarts students and Order members. The Battle of Hogwarts in May 1998 directly affected the village, with some fighting spilling beyond school boundaries into Hogsmeade streets. Several buildings sustained damage, particularly along the path leading to the school gates. Village residents participated in the battle's final stages, emerging from their homes and shops to join the reinforcements that turned the tide against Voldemort's forces. The post-war reconstruction included repairs to village structures alongside the more extensive rebuilding at Hogwarts itself. Modern Hogsmeade maintains a delicate balance between historical preservation and contemporary wizarding life. The village council evolved from the medieval elder system into a formal municipal authority, strictly regulates development to maintain the settlement's distinctive character. New construction must harmonize with the existing architectural style, and magical modifications remain subject to approval to prevent disruption of the village's carefully maintained enchantment network. Tourism has increased substantially since the Second Wizarding War, with Hogsmeade's role in the conflict drawing visitors interested in historical sites related to Harry Potter and the defeat of Voldemort. This increased attention has brought both economic benefits and challenges, as the village strives to accommodate visitors while preserving the authentic community that has existed for a millennium. Throughout its long history, Hogsmeade has maintained its essential character as Britain's only entirely magical settlement. Unlike Diagon Alley, concealed within Muggle London, or Godric's Hollow, shared with non-magical residents, Hogsmeade represents a community where magic permeates every aspect of daily life, from snow that remains pristine white despite chimney smoke to self-delivering packages between shops, from seasonal decorations that transform themselves to buildings that have adjusted to their inhabitants' needs over centuries. The village embodies the seamless integration of magic into ordinary existence. The village's endurance over 1,000 years speaks to the resilience of magical community. What began as one wizard's refuge grew into a settlement that has witnessed the entire post-founder's history of British wizardry, adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining its essential purpose as a place where magical folk can live openly among their kind. As our exploration of Hogsmeade's founding and development concludes, the fire's embers glow like distant cottage windows in the Highland dusk. The village stands as testament to the persistence of wizarding culture through centuries of challenge and change, each crooked lane and ancient shop front telling part of a story that continues to unfold with each new generation of residents and visitors. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps consider this. What places in your own life serve as Hogsmeade does for the wizarding world, heavens where you can be entirely yourself, free from the need for concealment or explanation? And how might we each contribute to creating such spaces where others can find the same freedom and belonging that Hengist of Woodcroft sought in that Highland valley so many centuries ago? Chapter 9. The collection of memories in the Pensieve. Memories shimmer in the stillness of a quiet mind, like stars reflected in a midnight pool. As our journey continues through the magical realms, let us now explore the delicate art of memory collection. How fragments of lived experience are drawn from the mind and preserved within the silvery depths of a pensieve, creating archives of thought more faithful than any written record or spoken account. The process of memory extraction stands among the most intimate magical acts possible, a literal externalization of one's inner experiences. Unlike most spells that affect the physical world, memory extraction directly engages with consciousness itself, drawing forth specific moments from the vast constellation of a lifetime's recollections. This delicate procedure requires precision, focus, and a keen understanding of one's own mental landscape. For the witch or wizard preparing to extract a memory, the first step involves a form of meditation quite unlike the practices of occlumency or legilimency. Rather than clearing the mind or penetrating another's thoughts, this preliminary state requires pinpoint concentration on a specific memory, recalling not just the visual elements but the full sensory and emotional experience of the moment. The practitioner must hold this complete recollection in perfect mental focus, neither allowing it to drift into associated memories, nor permitting present emotions to color the remembrance. With the memory held clearly in mind, the witch or wizard places their wand tip gently against their temple. The incantation for memory extraction remains unpublished in standard magical texts, considered too personal and potentially dangerous for casual experimentation. Those who learn the technique typically do so through direct instruction from a master of the mind arts, or, in rare cases, through family tradition passed through generations. For the person extracting the memory, the immediate effect is subtle but distinct. The externalized memory remains accessible to them, but takes on a quality similar to second-hand information, like recalling something read in a book rather than personally experienced. The emotional impact diminishes significantly, allowing for more objective consideration of potentially traumatic or overwhelming events. This distancing effect explains why many witches and wizards use pensieves not only for sharing memories, but for processing difficult experiences. As the spell activates, the practitioner experiences a curious sensation described variously as a gentle pulling, mental untethering, or thoughts becoming liquid. The memory begins to separate from its contextual associations in the mind, transforming from thought energy to the silvery substance visible when memories are viewed outside the body. This substance emerges at the wand tip, stretching between mind and wand in a glistening strand, the physical manifestation of memory itself. The appearance of this memory substance, neither gas nor liquid, but something between the two states, reflects its unique magical nature. Unlike physical matter that obeys standard laws of transfiguration, memory substance exists simultaneously as information, energy, and material. It contains complete sensory data, emotional resonance, and contextual awareness within its shifting ethereal form. The extraction reaches completion when the memory strand fully detaches from the temple, hanging momentarily from the wand tip before being transferred to the Pensieve basin. This final separation represents the most delicate moment in the process. A sudden loss of concentration or unsteady hand can result in memory fragmentation, with portions remaining in the mind, while others transfer to the external vessel. Once extracted, the memory must be transferred immediately to an appropriate container, typically a pensieve for viewing or a sealed crystal file for storage. Unlike most magical substances, externalized memory cannot exist indefinitely outside a suitable vessel. When exposed to air for extended periods, the memory substance gradually loses coherence, with the most emotionally charged elements dissipating first, followed by sensory details, and finally basic visual information. A memory left exposed for too long becomes irretrievably damaged, reduced to fragmentary images without context or emotional resonance. The precision possible in memory extraction varies with the practitioner's skill. Beginners typically extract entire scenes or encounters, unable to isolate specific elements within a memory. Master practitioners demonstrate remarkable selectivity, extracting precisely the relevant portions of a memory while leaving associated contextual elements undisturbed in the mind. This refined technique proves particularly valuable when memories contain sensitive information alongside relevant details, allowing for sharing necessary knowledge without compromising private aspects of recollection. The placement of memories into a pensieve involves more than simply depositing the silvery substance into the basin. A subtle wandless intention must accompany the transfer, imprinting the memory with markers that facilitate later retrieval and viewing. These magical markers function as organizational indexes, determining how the memory interacts with others already present in the pensieve, and establishing parameters for viewer interaction once inside the memory. Within the pensieve, multiple memories create fascinating interaction patterns. Crystal files provide the most common solution, as their natural molecular structure resonates harmoniously with memory substance. The highest quality containers use crystals formed through magical processes rather than natural formation, their lattice structures specifically engineered to maintain memory integrity indefinitely. These specialized files typically feature hermetic sealing charms and protective enchantments against magical interference, necessary precautions given the sensitivity of their contents. Within wizarding history, several remarkable memory collections have achieved fame or notoriety. The most comprehensive belongs to the Department of Mysteries, where the Memory Division maintains an archive dating back to the Ministry's founding. This collection primarily preserves memories of significant magical discoveries, historical events, and rare magical phenomena, serving both research and historical documentation purposes. The Pedagogical Memory Collection at Hogwarts, established during Armando Dippet's tenure as headmaster and substantially expanded by Albus Dumbledore, focuses on educational demonstrations too dangerous, rare, or complex to perform regularly. Related memories naturally gravitate toward one another, forming clusters based on chronological sequence, emotional similarity, or involving the same individuals. Contradictory memories develop clear boundaries, rarely blending even when their edges meet. These patterns create a visual map of memory relationships visible on the Pensieve's surface, swirling currents and eddies that magical scholars compare to the natural organization processes of the human mind itself. The storage of memories beyond immediate viewing presents additional challenges. Memories of perfect potion brewing techniques, encounters with extinct magical creatures, and demonstrations of spells requiring exceptional power provide invaluable learning resources for advanced students. Private memory collections typically reflect their owners' personal interests or professional needs. Magical historians often maintain extensive memory libraries containing eyewitness accounts of significant events. Unspeakables working on particular research questions collect memories related to their specialized fields. Some pure-blood families preserve ancestral memories as part of their heritage, passing down first-hand experiences of family history through generations. Albus Dumbledore's personal memory collection, arguably the most famous in recent wizarding history, demonstrated the strategic application of memory curation. His systematic gathering of memories related to Tom Riddle's life and the creation of Horcruxes represents one of the most targeted memory investigations ever conducted. By collecting recollections from diverse sources, acquaintances, victims, unwitting witnesses, and even extracted memories from other memories, Dumbledore constructed a comprehensive understanding impossible through any other investigative method. The ethical considerations surrounding memory collection remain complex and evolving. While extracting one's own memories raises few ethical concerns beyond personal safety, collecting memories from others introduces questions of consent, privacy, and potential manipulation. Unlike Legilimency, which forcibly extracts thoughts, memory sharing for Pensieve viewing typically occurs voluntarily. However, power dynamics, social pressure, or deception about intended use can compromise the genuinely consensual nature of such sharing. Memory authentication specialists employed by the Department of Magical Law Enforcement use sophisticated magical techniques to verify Pensieve evidence. These experts examine memories for signs of tampering, emotional distortion, or perceptual limitations that might compromise reliability. Their assessments help judicial authorities determine appropriate evidentiary weight for memories presented in legal proceedings. The process of memory collection from reluctant subjects presents particularly challenging ethical and legal questions. The legal status of memories as evidence in wizarding courts reflects these ethical complexities. While Pensieve memories provide more reliable information than verbal testimony, they remain subjective experiences rather than objective records. The Wizengamot recognizes several limitations. Memories show only what the person perceived and believed, not necessarily what objectively occurred. Memories can be subtly altered before extraction by selective attention or false associations, and in rare cases, memories can be deliberately modified through complex magic, though such tampering typically leaves detectable traces. Under specific circumstances, typically involving serious criminal investigations or imminent threats to wizarding security, the Ministry may authorize qualified legilimens to extract memories without explicit consent. Such extractions require multiple approvals, independent oversight, and precise targeting of relevant memories only. Even with these safeguards, the practice remains controversial among magical civil liberties advocates. For cooperative but deceased subjects, memory collection becomes impossible through standard means. This limitation explains the particular value of individuals who extracted and preserved key memories before their deaths. In rare cases involving memories of extraordinary historical or judicial importance, experimental techniques combining aspects of necromancy and legilimency have been attempted to retrieve memories from the recently deceased. The Department of Mysteries maintains classified research on such methods, though ethical concerns substantially restrict their practical application. The quality and reliability of collected memories vary significantly based on several factors. This memory drift phenomenon explains why historians particularly value memories extracted and preserved shortly after significant events rather than recollections preserved decades later. Memory enhancement techniques, while theoretically possible, remain controversial within the magical community. Certain potions claim to improve memory clarity before extraction, but independent research suggests they primarily increase confidence in recollections rather than actual accuracy. More reliable approaches involve preparatory mental exercises developed by occlumency masters helping subjects identify and separate authentic memory elements from later associations or interpretations. The emotional state of the memory provider, during both the original experience and the extraction process, affects clarity and accuracy. Memories extracted during extreme emotional distress often show perceptual distortions, exaggerated threats, compressed or expanded time perception, and heightened focus on specific details at the expense of contextual awareness. The time elapsed between experience and extraction similarly influences memory quality. Recent memories typically demonstrate greater detail and accuracy, while long past experiences may incorporate elements from subsequent retellings or related events. For those maintaining extensive memory libraries, preservation concerns extend beyond physical storage to maintaining the contextual knowledge necessary for proper interpretation. A memory showing a complex magical ritual provides limited value without understanding its purpose, cultural context, and theoretical foundations. The most comprehensive collections therefore include supplementary materials, written documentation, related memories, and explanatory notes, creating a complete framework for meaningful engagement with the preserved experiences. Beyond individual memories, some advanced practitioners explore techniques for extracting memory sequences, interconnected recollections that collectively provide comprehensive understanding of complex situations. This approach proves particularly valuable for educational applications, allowing students to experience logical progressions through complicated magical processes. The teaching memories used in advanced alchemy instruction at Hogwarts exemplify this sequential approach, guiding viewers through transmutation stages, too subtle to observe in real-time demonstrations. The organization and cataloging of substantial memory collections require specialized magical systems. Traditional methods used simple labeling charms on storage files, but larger archives implement more sophisticated approaches. The Department of Mysteries pioneered magical indexing systems that respond to specific thought patterns, allowing researchers to locate memories relevant to particular questions through focused concentration rather than manual searching. Private collectors often develop personalized organizational schemes reflecting their unique thought processes and research priorities. The magical community's most significant memory preservation project, the Wizarding Historical Memory Initiative, established after the Second Wizarding War, demonstrates the evolving approach to collective memory archiving. This ongoing effort collects and preserves first-hand experiences from diverse participants in the conflict, from prominent order members to ordinary witches and wizards affected by Voldemort's regime. By systematically preserving these varied perspectives, the initiative creates a multidimensional record designed to provide future generations with nuanced understanding beyond what conventional historical accounts could offer. The specialized field of memory restoration focuses on recovering damaged or degraded memories within the Pensieve environment. Just as art restoration experts might repair a damaged painting, memory specialists use precise magical techniques to reconstruct fragmented recollections. This delicate work requires extraordinary skill, as inappropriate intervention can inadvertently introduce artifacts or assumptions not present in the original memory. The most accomplished practitioners combine technical expertise with strict ethical discipline, refusing to enhance clarity beyond what the evidence supports. For individuals seeking to share particularly sensitive or traumatic memories, various distancing techniques have developed over centuries. Memory dilution, extracting the experience while deliberately retaining most emotional content, creates a more objective record, while protecting viewers from psychological impact. Perspective shifting, adjusting the viewpoint from first-person immersion to more detached observation, similarly reduces traumatic impact while preserving factual content. These approaches prove particularly valuable when memories must be shared with individuals who might lack the emotional capacity or preparation to process the experiences at full intensity. The future of memory collection extends beyond traditional Pensieve technology toward more integrated approaches. Experimental work at the Department of Mysteries explores techniques for direct memory sharing without extraction, creating temporary mental connections that allow experienced legilimens to guide others through their memories while maintaining complete control over what is shared. Though currently requiring exceptional magical skill and compatible mental structures, this approach could eventually provide more accessible memory sharing for educational and historical purposes. The fire has burned lower now, casting gentle shadows that dance like memories across the walls of our gathering place. As sleep begins to call, consider this question. If you could preserve 3 memories from your life in perfect detail, 3 moments to be experienced exactly as you lived them by those who come after you, which would you choose, and what might those selections reveal about what you value most in this fleeting experience we call life? As our exploration of memory collection concludes, we recognize that these techniques represent far more than magical curiosities or investigative tools. The externalization of memory, the ability to preserve and share our most personal experiences exactly as we perceived them, fundamentally transforms the relationship between individual consciousness and collective understanding. Through the silvery substance swirling in the Pensieve, moments that would otherwise remain locked within single minds become accessible across time and between individuals, creating bridges of perfect empathy impossible through any other means. Chapter 10. The Battle of the Astronomy Tower. The stars bear witness to moments both magnificent and terrible, their ancient light falling upon acts of courage and betrayal alike. As our evening's exploration continues, we turn to one of the darkest nights in Hogwarts' recent history, the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, where the school's tallest spire became the stage for tragedy, where promises were kept at terrible cost, and where the wizarding world lost its greatest defender against the rising darkness. This confrontation, occurring on a clear June night in 1997, marked a pivotal moment in the Second Wizarding War. Unlike the larger, more chaotic battles that would follow, this brief but devastating engagement represented a precisely executed strategic strike against the heart of magical resistance, Hogwarts School and its headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. To understand the battle's significance, we must first examine the events leading to that fateful night. Throughout the school year, Draco Malfoy, a 16-year-old Slytherin student and son of imprisoned Death Eater Lucius Malfoy, had been tasked by Lord Voldemort with an impossible mission to kill Albus Dumbledore. This assignment was not given with expectation of success, but rather as punishment for his father's failures, a fact Draco himself only partially comprehended. Behind the scenes, complex layers of planning and counterplanning were unfolding. Narcissa Malfoy, desperate to protect her son, had secured an unbreakable vow from Severus Snape, committing him to assist Draco and, if necessary, complete the task himself. Dumbledore, aware of much but not all of this arrangement, had extracted his own promise from Snape, that when the moment came, Snape would kill Dumbledore himself, thereby protecting his position as a spy and saving Draco from the soul-damaging act of murder. These intersecting promises and plans created a web of inevitable tragedy, with each participant trapped by their own commitments and the roles they had chosen or been forced to play. Against this backdrop, young Draco spent months in desperate attempts to fulfill his impossible task, his methods growing increasingly dangerous as his desperation mounted. His first attempts, a cursed necklace and poisoned mead, failed, causing collateral harm to other students, but never reaching their intended target. As spring turned to early summer, Draco finally discovered a way to breach Hogwarts' formidable defenses, a pair of vanishing cabinets forming a passage between the school's room of requirement and Borgin and Burke's shop in Nocturne Alley. After months of painstaking repair work, he succeeded in creating a pathway through which Death Eaters could enter the otherwise impenetrable castle. The night of the battle began with Dumbledore's absence from the school. Accompanied by Harry Potter, he had journeyed to a distant cave to retrieve what they believed was one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, a locket containing a fragment of the Dark Lord's soul. The retrieval required Dumbledore to drink a mysterious potion that caused him severe physical and psychological distress, leaving him significantly weakened for the confrontation to come. Upon their return to Hogsmeade, the first signs of trouble appeared. The Dark Mark, that sinister skull and serpent constellation created by Death Eaters, hovering above the Astronomy Tower. This shocking sight confirmed Dumbledore's fears that Hogwarts had been breached during their absence. Despite his weakened state, he insisted on returning immediately to the school, apparating with Harry to the tower's summit. Imagine that tower on this clear summer night. The stone platform open to the heavens, the distant lights of Hogsmeade village twinkling below, and above, stars wheeling in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the human drama about to unfold. Upon this stage, Albus Dumbledore would face his final hour, not in glorious magical combat as many might have expected, but in a moment of quiet sacrifice planned months before. Upon landing on the tower, Dumbledore immediately sensed the approach of their adversaries. With his remaining strength, he immobilized Harry under his invisibility cloak, an act that appeared cruel in the moment, but was in fact his final protection for the young wizard who would ultimately defeat Voldemort. Hidden and helpless, Harry became witness to the events that followed, unable to intervene, but positioned to carry the truth forward. Footsteps on the spiral staircase announced Draco Malfoy's arrival. Bursting onto the platform, wand extended, he disarmed Dumbledore with a well-executed Expelliarmus spell, a seemingly minor victory that would have profound implications for the Elder Wand's allegiance. What followed was not the immediate execution one might expect from a Death Eater, but a tense conversation revealing the complexity of Draco's position. The young Slytherin, now face-to-face with his target, found himself unable to deliver the killing curse. Despite months of preparation and the dire consequences of failure hanging over him and his family, Draco hesitated. Dumbledore, even in his weakened state, demonstrated remarkable insight and compassion, offering protection not just for Draco, but for his parents as well. This unexpected mercy visibly affected the young wizard, creating a moment of genuine doubt in his chosen path. This pivotal conversation, occurring while Death Eaters fought Order members and Hogwarts teachers in the corridors below, revealed Draco's method of infiltration and the extent of his reluctant involvement. As Dumbledore gently but persistently offered an alternative to the path of darkness, Draco's wand hand trembled, the physical manifestation of his internal conflict. In this moment, witnessing a master manipulator like Dumbledore use his final minutes to attempt the redemption of a student, we glimpse the profound educational commitment that defined his leadership. The quiet tension of this standoff shattered with the arrival of additional Death Eaters, Alecto and Amicus Caro, Fenrir Greyback, and others who had fought their way past the defending Order members. Their presence transformed the dynamic immediately, shifting from Draco's personal moral struggle to a public execution. The Death Eater's taunting of Dumbledore's weakened state contrasted sharply with his maintained dignity, highlighting the fundamental difference between these opposing forces. When Severus Snape finally emerged onto the tower, the atmosphere shifted yet again. His expressionless face revealed nothing of the impossible choice before him: to honor his unbreakable vow to Narcissa, or to spare the life of the man who had trusted and protected him for years. The momentary gaze between Snape and Dumbledore contained volumes of unspoken communication, culminating in Dumbledore's simple plea, "Severus, please." Those two words, interpreted by witnesses as begging for life, were in fact the opposite, a request to proceed with their prearranged plan, to end Dumbledore's life cleanly, rather than leaving him to the tortures the other Death Eaters would surely inflict. With evident revulsion etched into his features, Snape raised his wand and uttered the words that would echo through wizarding history. Avada Kedavra. The green light of the killing curse illuminated the tower briefly before Dumbledore's body was lifted backward, suspended momentarily against the starry sky before falling from the tower. This image, the greatest wizard of the age framed against the cosmos before his fall, became emblematic of the war's turning point, capturing both the personal tragedy and its broader significance. With Dumbledore's death, the protective enchantments he had personally maintained around Hogwarts began to fade. The Death Eaters, Their primary mission accomplished, retreated through the castle, engaging in skirmishes with Hogwarts defenders, but focused primarily on escape, rather than extended conflict. Their path took them through corridors, where members of the Order of the Phoenix and Dumbledore's army fought valiantly, but were ultimately unable to prevent their departure from the grounds. Below in the castle, several significant confrontations occurred simultaneously with the tower events. Bill Weasley suffered severe injuries from Fenrir Greyback, leaving facial scarring that would never fully heal. Neville Longbottom and Professor Flitwick were incapacitated while attempting to alert Snape, unwittingly preventing potential interference with the tower confrontation. Minerva McGonagall led the defensive effort against the invading Death Eaters, demonstrating the extraordinary skill that would later serve her well as headmistress. Harry Potter, released from Dumbledore's immobilization spell only after the headmaster's death, pursued Snape across the grounds in a rage of grief and betrayal. Their confrontation near the school gates revealed glimpses of Snape's complex position, his refusal to directly harm Harry despite the opportunity, his fury at being called a coward, and his revelation as the self-proclaimed half-blood prince, whose potions textbook had guided Harry throughout the year. Yet the full truth of Snape's actions and loyalties would remain hidden for nearly another year, allowing his apparent betrayal to stand as established fact. The immediate aftermath of the battle saw the gathering of students and staff around Dumbledore's fallen body on the grounds. The spontaneous tribute, wands raised to dispel the dark mark and replace it with pure light, represented a powerful moment of unity and defiance in the face of overwhelming loss. Even in death, Dumbledore inspired a demonstration of the collective strength he had always believed existed within the wizarding community. The strategic significance of the battle extended far beyond the loss of a single wizard. However legendary, Dumbledore's death removed the one individual Voldemort had ever feared, eliminating the primary obstacle to his plans for wizarding domination. Hogwarts, long considered an impregnable safe haven under Dumbledore's protection, had been successfully infiltrated, demonstrating that no place remained truly secure. The psychological impact on the wizarding community, the realization that if Dumbledore could fall, anyone might, created a climate of fear that facilitated Voldemort's subsequent takeover of the Ministry. For the Order of the Phoenix, the battle represented both a devastating loss and a critical transition. With their founder and leader gone, the resistance against Voldemort needed to evolve rapidly. Newer members stepped into more prominent roles, and the focus shifted from Dumbledore's sometimes mysterious long-term strategies to more immediate defensive operations. This transition, while painful, ultimately created a more distributed resistance that proved crucial during the darkest days that followed. The Death Eaters gained not just a tactical victory, but a significant morale advantage. Having eliminated their most formidable opponent, they proceeded with increased confidence in subsequent operations. For Voldemort personally, Dumbledore's death removed the shadow that had long fallen across his ambitions, allowing him to proceed with plans he had previously approached with caution. For Hogwarts itself, the battle marked the beginning of a transformation from educational institution to contested ground. Though the school would remain operational for another year, it would never return to its former state under Dumbledore's benevolent guidance. The Astronomy Tower, once a place of learning where students observed the cosmos and contemplated their place within it, became instead a site of somber memory, its height and visibility a constant reminder of what had been lost there. The significant players in the tower confrontation each carried the consequences of that night forward in distinct ways. Draco Malfoy, having failed in his assigned task yet being spared the sole damage of committing murder, entered a period of profound disillusionment with the cause he had been raised to serve. His experience demonstrated the distinction Dumbledore had always recognized between those who choose the dark path freely and those coerced onto it by circumstance or family pressure. Severus Snape, having fulfilled his promise to Dumbledore at the cost of being universally reviled as a traitor and murderer, entered the most difficult phase of his long deception. Promoted to headmaster under Voldemort's regime, He would work to mitigate the worst abuses against students while maintaining his cover until the war's final moments. The psychological burden of this position, hated by colleagues who had once been friends, forced to permit atrocities he could only partially prevent, represents one of the war's most poignant personal tragedies. Harry Potter's witnessing of Dumbledore's death transformed his understanding of the conflict from an abstract struggle against evil to a deeply personal mission. The loss of his mentor accelerated his maturation from student to leader, forcing him to rely on his own judgment rather than Dumbledore's guidance. The information gained during their final mission together, combined with the devastating loss, set Harry on the path that would eventually lead to his confrontation with Voldemort less than a year later. The funeral that followed the battle brought together the international wizarding community in unprecedented numbers, demonstrating Dumbledore's extraordinary influence beyond Britain's borders. Representatives from magical governments worldwide, former students spanning generations, and magical beings rarely seen in public gatherings came to pay respects, a final testament to the connections Dumbledore had fostered throughout his long life. In historical perspective, the Battle of the Astronomy Tower represents a masterclass in strategic misdirection. What appeared to participants as a straightforward, if tragic, confrontation was in fact the culmination of multiple long-term plans. Dumbledore's apparent defeat concealed his careful positioning of pieces for victories that would come after his death. The transfer of critical information to Harry, the preservation of Snape's cover, and even the orchestration of the Elder Wand's allegiance. Voldemort's apparent triumph similarly masked fundamental miscalculations that would ultimately contribute to his downfall. For students of magical history, the battle offers profound lessons about the nature of power and sacrifice. Dumbledore, widely considered the most powerful wizard of his age, chose a path that prioritized the protection of others, particularly young Draco, over his own survival. This choice reflected his mature understanding that power finds its highest expression not in domination, but in the capacity to accept personal loss for others' benefit. This philosophy, directly opposed to Voldemort's perception of death as the ultimate weakness, would eventually prove decisive in the conflict's resolution. The architectural significance of the setting deserves consideration as well. The Astronomy Tower, Hogwarts' highest point, had traditionally represented perspective and enlightenment, the place where students literally and figuratively rose above immediate concerns to contemplate larger patterns. That this location became the site of Dumbledore's fall creates a poignant contrast between the tower's aspirational purpose and the earthly realities of conflict and mortality. In later years, this juxtaposition would be incorporated into astronomy lessons, with professors noting how the same stars that witnessed tragedy continue their eternal cycles, offering perspective on human struggles. As night deepens around our fireside discussion, and the embers glow like distant stars, we recognize that the Battle of the Astronomy Tower represents not just a historical event, but a moment when multiple lives pivoted irrevocably. The choices made that night, by Dumbledore in accepting death, by Draco in hesitating before evil, by Snape in keeping his word at terrible personal cost, rippled outward to shape the war's conclusion long after the immediate consequences seemed clear. The tower stands still at Hogwarts, restored after the war, but forever marked by memory. Students still climb its spiral staircase for their astronomy lessons, gazing upward at the same stars that witnessed Dumbledore's fall. Perhaps some sense the weight of history in that place, while others, born in peacetime, know the story, but cannot fully comprehend its emotional impact on those who lived through the war years. As you drift towards sleep, consider this question that echoes from that tower's height. When faced with the most difficult choice imaginable, between what is right and what is easy, between personal survival and protection of others, what hidden strengths might we discover in ourselves, and how might our decisions in such moments reveal the true nature of our character in ways no ordinary circumstance could illuminate? Chapter 11. The Eccentricity of Luna Lovegood. Silver moonlight filters through our window as we turn to a story as luminous and unusual as its namesake. In the soft glow of evening, let us explore the remarkable life and distinctive perspective of Luna Lovegood, a young witch whose apparent oddity concealed wisdom that many more conventional minds failed to recognize. Luna Lovegood entered the narrative of the Second Wizarding War as a peripheral figure, a strange Ravenclaw girl with protuberant eyes and a dreamy demeanor who spoke uncomfortable truths and believed in creatures no one else could see. Yet, as events unfolded, this seemingly eccentric character revealed depths of courage, loyalty, and insight that transformed her from an object of ridicule to an essential ally and cherished friend. Born to Xenophilius and Pandora Lovegood in February 1981, Luna's early childhood unfolded in a home unlike any other in Wizarding Britain. The Lovegoods' rook-shaped house near Ottery St. Catchpole stood as a physical manifestation of their unconventional approach to life, its circular rooms filled with unusual artifacts, experimental magical devices, and research materials for Xenophilius's publication, The Quibbler. Luna's mother, Pandora, was an exceptionally gifted witch with a particular talent for experimental spell creation. Her work pushed the boundaries of established magical theory, exploring possibilities that more conservative researchers dismissed as impossible. This bold approach to magic would ultimately lead to tragedy when Luna was 9 years old. While attempting to develop a new spell, Pandora miscalculated, resulting in a catastrophic magical accident that took her life before her daughter's eyes. This early exposure to death profoundly shaped Luna's development. Unlike many children shielded from life's harsher realities, Luna directly confronted mortality at a young age. The experience left her with an unusual perspective on death, not as something to be feared, but as a natural transition to another form of existence. This view would later provide unexpected comfort to Harry Potter as he struggled with his godfather's death, when Luna gently suggested that loved ones never truly leave us. Following her mother's death, Luna was raised primarily by her father, Xenophilius. As the editor of The Quibbler, a publication dedicated to conspiracy theories, unusual magical creatures, and alternative perspectives on wizarding news, Xenophilius cultivated an environment where questioning established wisdom was not merely permitted, but actively encouraged. Where other magical parents might have dismissed childish imagination, Xenophilius nurtured Luna's unique way of seeing the world. The creatures Luna became famous for mentioning, Nargles, Rackspurts, crumple-horned snorkax, were not simply childish inventions, but part of a family tradition of looking beyond accepted magical knowledge. Xenophilius taught his daughter that the wizarding world's understanding of magical creatures remained woefully incomplete, with ministry classification systems reflecting political convenience rather than biological reality. The search for these beings represented not delusion, but intellectual openness to possibilities beyond current understanding. Luna's fashion choices, often described as bizarre by her peers, similarly reflected deliberate philosophical positions rather than mere eccentricity. Her butterbeer cork necklace, designed to repel nargles, demonstrated her practical application of beliefs others dismissed. Her radish earrings, actually dirigible plums grown in the Lovegood's garden, were prized for their enhancement of one's ability to accept the extraordinary, a quality Luna valued highly. Even her habit of wearing her wand behind her ear represented a practical choice for someone who might need to quickly access it while keeping hands free for examining interesting discoveries. When Luna arrived at Hogwarts in 1992 and was sorted into Ravenclaw, her housemates initially seemed like natural companions for someone with her intellectual curiosity. However, Ravenclaw's particular brand of wisdom focused on provable knowledge, logical analysis, and academic achievement, often clashed with Luna's more intuitive, open-minded approach to understanding the world. Her willingness to consider possibilities without immediate empirical evidence struck many Ravenclaws as intellectual sloppiness rather than imaginative thinking. This fundamental philosophical difference led to Luna's isolation within her own house. Ravenclaws, proud of their rational approach to magic, often treated Luna with dismissive mockery. They stole and hid her possessions, referred to her as loony Lovegood, and excluded her from study groups and social gatherings. This treatment reflected not just teenage cruelty, but a genuine intellectual disagreement about what constituted proper magical thinking. Luna's response to this bullying revealed much about her character. Rather than changing her beliefs to gain acceptance or responding with anger, she maintained a serene detachment from her peers' opinions. When her possessions disappeared, she simply adapted, posting notices and assuming the items would eventually return, which they typically did at year's end, when the novelty of tormenting her had worn off. This patience stemmed not from passivity, but from confidence in her own perspective, and a remarkably mature understanding that others' treatment reflected their limitations rather than her worth. Her first significant appearance in the wider story came in her 4th year, when she joined Dumbledore's army, the secret defense group formed to provide practical magical training during Dolores Umbridge's educational suppression. Luna's participation demonstrated that beneath her dreamy exterior lay genuine magical talent and a clear-eyed understanding of the growing threats to the wizarding world. During DA meetings, Luna showed particular aptitude for defensive magic, mastering complex spells like the Patronus charm with surprising ease. Her Patronus, a hare, reflected her essential nature, quick-thinking, alert to danger, yet playful and capable of unexpected changes in direction that confound pursuers. Fellow students who had dismissed her as merely odd were forced to reconsider as her magical capability became apparent. The Department of Mystery's battle at the end of that school year marked Luna's transition from peripheral figure to core ally. When Harry needed to reach London quickly, Luna pragmatically suggested the Strahls, the skeletal winged horses visible only to those who had witnessed death. This solution highlighted how Luna's unconventional perspectives could provide practical advantages, seeing possibilities others missed due to conventional thinking. During the battle itself, Luna fought with remarkable composure against adult Death Eaters, maintaining her focus despite the chaos and danger. Her performance demonstrated that accepting unusual possibilities did not equate to detachment from reality. Rather, it prepared her to adapt quickly to extraordinary circumstances without the shock or denial that momentarily paralyzed others. The following year brought Luna increased visibility in the Hogwarts social landscape. Her commentary during the Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, where she discussed losers' liturgy and cloud shapes rather than game statistics, perfectly encapsulated her unique perspective. While seemingly disconnected from the expected narrative, her observations contained their own internal logic and occasionally offered insights conventional commentary missed entirely. Luna's invitation to Professor Slughorn's Christmas party as Harry's friend, rather than romantic interest, established one of the most refreshing aspects of her character development, a platonic cross-gender friendship built on mutual respect and appreciation rather than romantic tension. In a narrative with multiple romantic subplots, Luna and Harry's straightforward friendship provided a valuable counterexample of how meaningful relationships can develop without romantic elements. The wedding of Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour the following summer showcased Luna's social navigation strategies. Aware that her yellow dress and sunflower decorations might attract attention, she nevertheless chose authentic self-expression over blending in. When conversing with wedding guests, she maintained her honesty while demonstrating subtle social adaptability, still mentioning Crumplehorn Snorkax, but framing them in ways that allowed conversations to continue rather than derailing into debates about their existence. During the Carrow's reign at Hogwarts, Luna's role in the Resistance revealed her practical courage. As one of the leaders who revived Dumbledore's army, she participated in dangerous acts of sabotage and defiance. Her unconventional thinking proved tactically valuable, suggesting unexpected approaches that the more militaristic Death Eaters failed to anticipate. Even when caught and punished, Luna maintained her essential serenity, refusing to give her captors the satisfaction of breaking her spirit. Luna's kidnapping from the Hogwarts Express during Christmas break represented a darker turn in her personal story. Taken to Malfoy Manor as leverage against her father, she endured months of imprisonment in the cellar alongside wandmaker Garrick Ollivander. This captivity tested her optimism in ways superficial mockery at school never had, yet reports from fellow prisoners indicate she maintained her unique perspective even in these dire circumstances. During her imprisonment, Luna's compassionate nature emerged strongly. She provided comfort to the elderly Ollivander, whose physical and mental health had deteriorated under Voldemort's interrogation. Through conversation, small acts of kindness, and sharing her distinctive worldview, Luna created moments of psychological escape, even when physical freedom remained impossible. Ollivander would later credit her with preserving his sanity during their shared confinement. After being rescued by Dobby along with other prisoners, Luna recovered at Shell Cottage. Even in this period of recuperation, her perceptiveness remained sharp. She quickly recognized the ghost of Helena Ravenclaw at Hogwarts, whom most students mistook for an ordinary ghost, and facilitated the crucial conversation that helped Harry locate Ravenclaw's diadem Horcrux. This contribution to Voldemort's defeat demonstrated how Luna's willingness to acknowledge overlooked magical beings could yield crucial advantages. During the Battle of Hogwarts, Luna fought alongside her friends with the same quiet determination she had shown throughout her trials. Her magical skill, developed through DA training and honed by necessity during the Carrows regime, made her a formidable combatant despite her youth. After Voldemort's temporary ceasefire, it was Luna who helped distract the grieving crowd from Harry's apparently dead body with a conjured hair Patronus, creating the diversion needed for Harry to disappear under his invisibility cloak. Luna's post-war journey reflected her consistent character development. Unlike many of her peers who pursued conventional career paths in the ministry or magical education, Luna became a magizoologist, traveling the world to research and document magical creatures. This profession perfectly suited her lifelong interest in biological possibilities beyond established knowledge, allowing her to approach with rigorous methodology the questions that had fascinated her since childhood. While she never found the crumple-horned snorkack, eventually concluding her father had been mistaken about its existence, Luna discovered several previously undocumented magical species, adding significantly to Wizarding understanding of magical biology. Her willingness to acknowledge when evidence contradicted long-held beliefs demonstrated that her open-mindedness extended in all directions. She could accept both possibilities overlooked by others and the limitations of her own previous assumptions when facts warranted. Luna's marriage to Rolf Scamander, grandson of the famous magizoologist Newt Scamander, united two families dedicated to expanding magical knowledge beyond conventional boundaries. Their twin sons, Lorcan and Lysander, grew up in a home where questioning received wisdom was encouraged and exploration celebrated. The Scamander Lovegood expeditions became renowned in magizoological circles for their methodological innovation and discoveries in remote magical ecosystems. Throughout her life, Luna maintained her connections to the friends who had accepted her during Hogwarts' darkest days. Her home featured hand-painted portraits of Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and Neville, linked by the repeated word friends, a touching tribute to relationships she valued above almost anything else. For someone once defined by social isolation, these genuine friendships represented not just personal connections, but vindication of her authentic self-expression. Luna's philosophical perspective, initially dismissed as oddity, contains wisdom worth examining more closely. Her acceptance of death, as part of a larger continuum, reflects ancient magical traditions predating modern wizarding society. Her willingness to consider unseen influences parallels advanced magical theory about the interconnection of visible and invisible magical forces. Her comfort with uncertainty, maintaining hypotheses while acknowledging the limits of current evidence, models scientific thinking at its best. Perhaps most significantly, Luna demonstrated emotional intelligence beyond her years. Her ability to see past social pretense to underlying truths allowed her to connect with others at deeper levels than many more socially adept peers. When Harry was grieving Sirius, when Ollivander was losing hope, When her friends faced seemingly insurmountable challenges, Luna offered perspectives that created space for both acknowledging pain and finding paths forward. This emotional wisdom, easily overlooked amid discussion of her stranger beliefs, constituted perhaps her most valuable quality. Luna's acceptance of social rejection without internalizing negative judgments reflects remarkable psychological resilience. Rather than defining herself through others' opinions, she maintained confidence in her own worth independent of external validation. This centering allowed her to move through difficult circumstances without the burden of constantly seeking approval, a freedom many more conventional personalities never achieve. The publication history of the Quibbler illuminates another aspect of Luna's background often overlooked. While frequently described as merely a conspiracy-minded tabloid, the Quibbler, under Xenophilius Lovegood's editorship, consistently challenged ministry narratives during periods when established magical media parroted official positions regardless of their accuracy. This journalistic contrarianism, though often expressed through sensationalistic theories, represented a valuable independent voice in a magical media landscape dominated by a single major publication. During Voldemort's rise to power, the Quibbler became the only publication willing to print the truth about Harry Potter and Dumbledore when the prophet engaged in character assassination at the Ministry's behest. When Voldemort later took control of Wizard Media, the Quibbler again stood alone in supporting the resistance, until threats against Luna forced Xenophilius to reverse his editorial position. This publishing history suggests Luna's upbringing included not just belief in unusual creatures, but also a healthy skepticism towards centralized authority and official narratives, a perspective that proved prescient as events unfolded. Luna's impact on those around her extended beyond practical contributions to subtle influence on their perspectives. Harry, initially embarrassed by her strange statements, gradually came to appreciate her honesty and unique viewpoint. Hermione, despite continued skepticism toward Luna's more unusual beliefs, learned to recognize how her own intellectual certainty could sometimes close off valuable possibilities. Even practical-minded Ron developed grudging respect for Luna's unshakable authenticity in a world where many adjusted their positions based on political winds. As our exploration of Luna Lovegood draws to a close, the moonlight that shares her name casts silver shadows across our gathering. Her story reminds us that eccentricity, often dismissed as weakness or delusion, frequently contains wisdom conventional thinking cannot access. Luna's journey from ridiculed outsider to valued ally, from loony Lovegood to respected magizoologist, offers a gentle rebuke to rigid categorization of people based on superficial assessment. The fire has burned low now, matching the gentle pace of Luna's own voice, as she might discuss the habits of blibbering humdingers or the healing properties of Gertie roots. As sleep begins to call, consider this question. What dismissed perspectives in your own world might contain unexpected wisdom if approached with Luna's blend of openness, serenity, and quiet courage? Perhaps beyond the boundaries of what we consider certain lies, a universe of possibility as vast and beautiful as the night sky Luna so loved to contemplate. Chapter 12. The Agony of the Cruciatus Curse. The embers of our fire glow like distant warnings as we approach our final tale of the evening. In the deepening shadows, we must turn our attention to one of the darkest aspects of magical power, the Cruciatus Curse, the Torture Curse, whose very incantation Crucio derives from the Latin word for to torture or to torment. This magic represents the deliberate infliction of suffering in its purest form, a spell designed for no purpose beyond causing excruciating pain. Among the three unforgivable curses, the Cruciatus holds a unique position. While the Imperius curse controls and the killing curse destroys, the Cruciatus exists solely to create suffering, a purpose so fundamentally opposed to healing and protective magic that its practice requires a particular psychological disposition, rarely found even among those drawn to dark arts. The origins of the Cruciatus curse remain somewhat obscured in magical history, though early references appear in Mediterranean magical texts dating to the 4th century BCE. These primitive versions required physical contact between caster and victim, limiting their practical application. The modern incantation and wand work developed during the medieval period, with the first documented use of Crucio as a specific spell appearing in the private grimoire of the 12th century dark witch Morgana Pendragon. Unlike many complex spells that require specific movements and precise pronunciation, the Cruciatus depends primarily on the caster's emotional state and intent. The wizard must truly desire to cause pain, to take pleasure in the suffering they create, for the curse to achieve its full effect. This psychological requirement explains why the spell cannot be cast effectively in moments of righteous anger or defensive reaction. It demands a more fundamental embrace of cruelty that most witches and wizards, regardless of other moral failings, cannot access. The magical mechanics of the Cruciatus curse involve direct manipulation of the victim's nerve pathways and pain receptors. Unlike physical torture, which damages tissue to create pain signals, the Cruciatus generates pain directly within the neurological system without causing visible injury. This distinction makes the curse particularly insidious, as victims experience agony equivalent to severe physical trauma, while their bodies remain seemingly intact, leaving no external evidence of their suffering. Magical theorists describe the curse as creating a phantom nervous system overlaid upon the victim's actual nerves. This magical construct amplifies pain sensations exponentially, while preventing the body's natural pain suppression mechanisms from activating. The result is pain beyond ordinary physical limits, a sensation that bypasses the brain's capacity to adapt to or compartmentalize suffering. Victims of the Cruciatus curse describe the experience in remarkably similar terms, regardless of their background or pain tolerance. The sensation begins as thousands of white-hot knives, piercing every centimeter of skin simultaneously. This initial shock gives way to the feeling of bones being ground to powder, while still inside the body, muscles tearing from their attachments, and internal organs rupturing, all without the release that actual physical damage might provide through unconsciousness or shock. The curse's effects extend beyond immediate physical agony. The magical nature of the pain prevents the mind's normal protective mechanisms from engaging, where natural pain triggers endorphin release, and eventually shock or unconsciousness. The Cruciatus deliberately blocks these responses, forcing the victim to experience the full intensity of suffering without relief. This sustained neural overload explains the curse's capacity to cause permanent psychological damage, even without physical injury. From a legal perspective, the Cruciatus has been classified as unforgivable in most wizarding jurisdictions since the late 17th century. The British Ministry of Magic formally designated it as such in 1717, making its use against another human being punishable by life imprisonment in Azkaban. This severe penalty acknowledges not just the immediate suffering caused, but the profound violation of magical ethics the curse represents. During both wizarding wars, the Cruciatus became a signature spell of Voldemort's Death Eaters. Certain followers demonstrated particular affinity for the curse, suggesting personal psychological alignment with its requirements. Bellatrix Lestrange gained particular notoriety for her expertise with Crucio, using it not merely as an interrogation technique, but as personal entertainment, a distinction that revealed much about her character and explains why her application of the curse proved especially damaging to its victims. The most infamous application of the Cruciatus curse occurred after Voldemort's first fall, when a group of Death Eaters including Bellatrix and Rodolphus Lestrange, Rabiston Lestrange, and Barty Crouch Jr., captured and tortured Frank and Alice Longbottom. The Auror couple endured the curse for hours as their attackers demanded information about their master's whereabouts, information they did not possess. The Longbottoms case demonstrates the curse's most devastating long-term consequence, permanent psychological damage resulting from extended exposure. Though physically recovered, both Frank and Alice suffered irreparable mental collapse, losing all sense of identity and recognition of even their closest family members. Their condition, unresponsive to magical or mundane treatment, necessitated permanent residence in St. Mungo's long-term care ward, a fate many consider worse than death, representing the complete erasure of self, while the body continues to exist. The Longbottom story illustrates a particularly cruel reality of the Cruciatus curse, its capacity to destroy without killing, to leave victims physically alive, but psychologically devastated, trapped in bodies that survived what their minds could not. For their son Neville, this created a uniquely painful form of loss, parents who remained physically present, but permanently inaccessible, existing in a liminal state between presence and absence. Healing after exposure to the Cruciatus presents extraordinary challenges for medical practitioners. Unlike physical injuries that respond to targeted treatment, the curse's effects permeate the entire nervous system. Immediate interventions focus on neural calming potions that reduce residual pain and prevent further damage from the body's stress response. These treatments prove reasonably effective for limited exposure, but offer diminishing returns for victims subjected to repeated or extended application of the curse. Mungo's hospital maintains a specialized ward for Cruciatus recovery, where healers combine conventional magical medicine with more experimental approaches. Techniques include memory modification to reduce trauma associations, targeted magical nerve regeneration, and specialized potions that repair damaged neurotransmitter pathways. Despite these advanced treatments, full recovery remains rare for cases involving more than brief exposure. The psychological aftermath of the Cruciatus extends well beyond physical recovery. Survivors frequently develop a condition healers term post-Cruciatus anxiety, a constellation of symptoms including heightened startle response, intrusive memories of the torture, and extreme avoidance of situations reminiscent of the original attack. This condition proves particularly resistant to standard calming potions and cheering charms, often requiring long-term psychological treatment from specialized mind healers. Perhaps most disturbing for survivors is the curse's tendency to embed itself in procedural memory, the body's unconscious remembrance of sensations. Long after conscious recollection of the torture fades, victims may experience sudden physical recreations of the pain without apparent triggers. These phantom Cruciatus episodes can occur years after the original curse, creating unpredictable relapses that complicate recovery and reintegration into normal wizarding society. From a neurological perspective, the Cruciatus represents a unique form of magical damage. Unlike spells that cause discrete physical effects, Crucio creates widespread changes to the brain's pain processing centers. Magical brain imaging shows distinctive patterns in recovered victims' heightened activity in pain perception regions and diminished function in areas responsible for pain modulation. These changes, visible years after exposure, suggest the curse creates permanent alterations to neural architecture beyond immediate suffering. Resistance to the Cruciatus, while not impossible, requires extraordinary mental discipline or specific magical countermeasures. Natural occlumens demonstrate moderately enhanced resilience, their mental compartmentalization providing limited protection against the curse's psychological components. However, even the most accomplished practitioners of mind arts cannot fully block the physical agony, merely reducing secondary effects like memory formation or psychological trauma. Certain rare magical genealogies show hereditary resistance to pain curses, most notably the Parvamel bloodline from northern India, whose members demonstrate unusual tolerance to the Cruciatus. Magical researchers attribute this resistance to a difference in magical neural interface rather than conventional pain tolerance, suggesting fundamental variations in how magic interacts with nervous systems across different wizarding populations. The casting of the Cruciatus requires psychological conditions that have attracted significant study from magical researchers specializing in dark arts psychology. Unlike most spells that depend primarily on technique and power, successful use of Crucio demands emotional investment in causing suffering, what specialists term active sadism, rather than merely anger or dislike. This requirement explains why many wizards aligned with dark causes nevertheless prove incapable of effective Cruciatus casting despite sufficient magical ability. Harry Potter's attempt to use the curse against Bellatrix Lestrange after Sirius Black's death illustrates this principle. Despite genuine rage and considerable magical power, his Cruciatus produced only momentary pain, rather than the overwhelming agony a proper casting creates. Bellatrix herself identified the issue with remarkable clarity. "You need to mean it." This exchange reveals the fundamental nature of the unforgivable curses as extensions of specific psychological states rather than mere technical incantations. The relationship between the Cruciatus and other pain-inducing spells deserves examination. Many legal spells can cause significant discomfort. Stinging hexes, bone-breaking curses, and various combat spells all produce pain as a secondary effect. The distinction lies in both intent and design. These spells create pain as a consequence of physical effects with practical applications, while the Cruciatus exists solely to generate suffering without functional purpose beyond torture. This distinction informs magical law across most jurisdictions. Spells causing incidental pain, even severe, generally remain legal when used in legitimate contexts like dueling, self-defense, or certain magical occupations. The Cruciatus, lacking any application beyond torture, receives absolute prohibition regardless of circumstance. Even Aurors during the First Wizarding War, temporarily authorized to use other unforgivables against Death Eaters, remained prohibited from employing Crucio, a restriction reflecting not just ethical concerns, but recognition of the spell's corrupting influence on its caster. The psychological impact on those who regularly cast the Cruciatus shows clear patterns across historical cases. Continued use appears to strengthen the sadistic tendencies required for effective casting while diminishing empathic capacity, creating a self-reinforcing cycle where the curse becomes both easier to cast and more frequently used. This pattern explains the psychological deterioration observed in Death Eaters like Bellatrix Lestrange, whose initially controlled cruelty evolved into increasingly erratic sadism as her use of the curse became habitual. Among the Death Eaters, attitudes toward the Cruciatus revealed important distinctions between factions. Those following Voldemort from ideological commitment to blood purism often viewed the curse as a necessary tool rather than a pleasure, using it functionally for interrogation or punishment. In contrast, those drawn to Voldemort primarily through attraction to power and cruelty, Bellatrix Lestrange, Antonin Dolohov, and the Caro siblings among them, embraced Crucio enthusiastically, often employing it beyond strategic necessity. During the Death Eaters' occupation of Hogwarts, this distinction became particularly apparent. Amicus Caro introduced the Cruciatus into the curriculum, forcing students to practice it on those who earned detentions. This normalization of torture represented one of the most profound perversions of Hogwarts' educational mission, turning magical instruction from knowledge development to systematic cruelty. The students' resistance to this practice, particularly their willingness to accept punishment rather than torture classmates, demonstrated the natural human aversion to causing suffering that the curse requires its caster to overcome. The Cruciatus curse's interaction with various magical protections yields insights into its fundamental nature. Standard shield charms, Protego, provide no defense, as the curse operates directly on the victim's nervous system rather than approaching as an external force. Certain ancient protective amulets show limited efficacy, particularly those incorporating Sphinx hair or Phoenix tears, though even these merely reduce intensity rather than blocking the curse entirely. Interestingly, magical creatures demonstrate varying susceptibility to Crucio based on their neurological structure rather than their inherent magical resistance. Beings with nervous systems similar to humans, centaurs, merpeople, and goblins experience the full effect. Creatures with fundamentally different pain processing, such as acromantulas or dragons, show significantly reduced response. This pattern suggests the curse evolved specifically to target human neurological architecture, with its effectiveness against other beings varying based on physiological similarity. Magical theory proposes that the Cruciatus operates partly through sympathetic principles, the caster's visualization of suffering, creating a magical template that manifests in the victim's body. This mechanism explains why the curse's intensity correlates directly with the caster's emotional investment in causing pain. Those who cast Crucio with genuine pleasure in others' agony create more powerful effects than those using it instrumentally, regardless of their relative magical strength in other disciplines. The curse's Latin-derived incantation reflects the medieval magical tradition's use of classical languages to access specific magical resonances. Crucio etymologically connects to crucifixion, among the most agonizing execution methods in human history, creating a linguistic channel for the specific type of suffering the spell generates. This precise pain association distinguishes it from broader harm-causing spells and contributes to its resistance to conventional magical defenses. From an ethical perspective, the Cruciatus represents a uniquely problematic magic even among dark arts. Unlike many dangerous spells that can claim legitimate applications despite their potential for misuse, Crucio exists solely to cause suffering. This singular purpose places it beyond ethical rehabilitation. No context justifies its use. No circumstance mitigates its fundamental violation of magical ethics. The absolute prohibition across wizarding legal systems recognizes this essential quality, maintaining consistent penalties regardless of changing attitudes toward other regulated magic. At the deepest level, the Cruciatus curse illuminates fundamental principles about magic itself. The requirement for genuine sadistic intent demonstrates that powerful magic, particularly affecting consciousness, depends on the caster's authentic emotional and psychological state, rather than merely technique or power. This connection between internal state and magical effect explains why dark arts often corrupt their practitioners. The spells themselves require and reinforce psychological patterns, antithetical to healthy human development. As our exploration of this darkest magic draws to a close, the fire has burned down to its final embers, casting more shadow than light across our gathering. These shadows serve as appropriate metaphors for the ethical darkness the Cruciatus represents, a magic that causes only harm, designed solely for cruelty, requiring its caster to embrace the worst aspects of human nature. The existence of such magic reminds us that the wizarding world, for all its wonders and beauty, contains elements of profound darkness. The capacity to cause suffering through magical means reflects the dual nature of power itself, neither inherently good nor evil, but always shaped by the intentions and choices of those who wield it. The classification of the Cruciatus as unforgivable stands as testimony to the wizarding community's recognition that certain applications of magic violate fundamental ethical boundaries, regardless of circumstance. As sleep beckons, and our journey through these 12 explorations concludes, consider this final question. In a world where the most terrible suffering can be inflicted with a word and a thought, what inner strength must be cultivated to resist the temptation of such power, and what does our revulsion toward the Cruciatus curse reveal about our shared humanity, despite our inevitable differences and conflicts?